All right, cool.
Sick. Okay, let's get this puppy set up.
I'd nominate myself for an evolution debate. Just throwing that out there.
Hell yeah. Okay, good. Let me see if I can get Taylor back because she was keen to have a proper... I'm tagging Taylor. I'm trying to think who else to mention.
We are live. I just started it. We are live.
All right, awesome. Let's do it then. Welcome all back to Worldwide Debates, the Coliseum. We've got Rich here, who's going to be defending evolution. We're going to try and pull in a few more people to get it going. You've met Sage before, haven't you, Rich? Or been subjected
I believe
to
I
it?
have. Yeah.
So the idea is pretty simple. We want to have some debates. I'm sort of building and trying to hone the bot as well, so it might go off
Sage
the rails.
here!
Holy shit, Sage. It's a good start.
Say again?
Yeah.
Just-
Okay. Yeah.
A wild shouting start there, Sage.
You were discussing a new debate board setup and how it should improve readability and scoring during discussions.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I might start a new board. We need some people in here for the topic. So Richard.
Oh, that works well.
Evolution.
That looks good.
Yeah. We've got Pazza as well. We've got Charlie Handsome. Who's Charlie Handsome again? We've talked before, haven't we? Just got to lure in some normies. We've got two people. Pazza, are you going to step up for a debate? What topics do you have? I'm making a bit of a list.
Oh, no, I'm just going to listen for a bit. I'm not aware of the format here, so.
Cool. You're welcome to. It's sort of, yeah, we're not going to do super formal like, you get X minutes and you get X minutes, but we're going to try and keep it so it's orderly, a little like functional. Like it's just, if you're trying to listen to both sides and understand what's going on, that's what I'm trying to learn how to do. And then in turn teach to Sage. Just trying to figure, we need some alt people, some believers in wild stuff to come in.
Well, I think Kurt Cobain shot himself. I'll debate someone else. Or didn't shoot himself, sorry, that he was murdered.
Oh, that's a fun starting one. Okay, so was it him? Because the other claim is that Courtney Love shot him, right?
Well, there was a plan to have Kurt Cobain killed. Wasn't necessarily Courtney Love who pulled the trigger, but she definitely facilitated the act.
Okay, so that's a good one. Who wants to take Rich on that one, where the Kurt Cobain shot himself? Sure,
Hey, maybe it's me. Maybe it's me. Someone else can step up for any position.
And so you think he did kill himself?
No,
Surely
I think that Courtney Love had a plot to have him killed.
Okay, so you feel it was a bit of an inside job, a kind of plan. And what's the motivation, do you think?
He was going to be leaving Nirvana and Courtney Love to just go experience life on his own.
Mm-hmm.
And then Courtney Love would be left irrelevant to the entire music community.
What if so your challenge is against Courtney Love, I guess, this narrative around her.
I don't think she's available for the debate tonight, though.
Well, I'm trying to figure out it's a very specific claim. So I guess I could battle it with like an equally specific claim to see which claim the bot might have more fun with.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for example, I know that Kurt Cobain became Rivers Cuomo of Weezer. So he didn't actually die. This whole story around Courtney Love is just a ruse. He actually became Rivers Cuomo. Yeah, that guy.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So not even dead at all. What do you think of that?
No, not even dead at all.
That?
The funny part is that he's always talking about Kurt Cobain, and I wonder what kind of music he would make today. He's got his personal notebook, his the one he wrote all his songs in. He's got Kurt Cobain's notebook. He's a huge fanboy. He posts on Twitter about Kurt Cobain all the time. He had Weezer had a cover band named Goat Punishment. Okay?
Goat Punishment.
Goat Punishment. So if you were, for example, to be famous in Hollywood, to be a singer or a songwriter, a musician, that you might be approached to make or sign a contract with the devil, right? And he would secure your materialistic success in exchange for your soul. Now, many people like this fall under the category of what's called Club 27. You know, many musicians, Amy Winehouse, what's the black guy turned to Morgan Freeman? Whatever. There's many people who have died at 27 as a musician, and they all appear to have an equally interesting doppelganger that's still alive under a different name. And Kurt Cobain is one of those people. So, yeah, if he's still alive, he couldn't possibly have been killed by anyone, not even whatever her face is.
But he had to, if he was still alive, he would have had to have given up his entire fortune in escaping, wouldn't he?
I'm sure that could all be managed and funneled or whatever is necessary. You know, oftentimes these Club 27 people who die and come back, you'll end up seeing them going to functions with the old family members, like daughters, sons, stuff like that. So it's as if they're all the same little group of friends.
So what portion of Kurt Cobain's estate do you think Courtney Love actually ended up with?
I don't know. I'm not an accountant. It's not really important to the point because I'm winning my argument and you're losing yours.
Okay, but Courtney Love inherited his estate, and in their marriage, they had a prenup, and she stood to lose everything if they divorced. He was going to leave Nirvana apparently, which meant she would have even lost even more. And if she'd have killed him, she would have inherited everything.
And massively increase the value, I guess.
Yeah.
The old dead artist's bank.
Yeah, being a dead artist can make you tons of money. Another point in my camp.
So what do you gain when this Club 27, you're selling your soul to the devil. What do you gain when you sell your soul to the devil? Is that like you gain all of the money and fame that you would have wished for?
Well, you have to perform. Now there is a case to be made that what was released in these Epstein files, that there were baby farms. I know it sounds kind of weird, but essentially there would be a group of babies that were possibly intentionally, I don't know, incubated or raised or surrogate or some sort of process that these people were raised. Maybe their bloodlines are bastard children of elite people. I don't know, but they're raised in an inverted satanic environment. So I'm not even sure there's a real contract that they sign, other than they could have just been raised inside of these cults. But, there's also a video interview. One of the first video interviews of Weezer by public access television in LA. And the end of this video had an email in the middle of the screen, right? And it was Mr. Elvis 33. Mr. Elvis 33. So Elvis is another one of these people that faked his death, and 33 is obviously having to do with Masonic symbolism. All right. Also, the first question that the interviewer asked had to do with Judas, making comments about the biblical reference of the evil guy that turned on Jesus in the Bible.
Riggs is holding the floor tightly.
Yeah, it's easy when you actually have a winning position.
But
Now,
you think
go
he's
ahead.
Rivers Cuomo then?
Absolutely.
Even though Rivers Cuomo had was in a glam metal band called Avant Garde in the 1980s.
Yeah, they could say anything, right? You know, they just fabricated entire history. You know, it's interesting. You can look at all the pictures of Rivers Cuomo in his childhood, etc., and you can see distinctly that they are photoshopped images that either have really soft edges around the face, or you see the geometry of the face that is not in line with the geometry of the photo.
You think
so very clearly photo.
Do you think that Patrick Wilson, who met him when he did, do you think he? I don't know. Patrick Wilson met him in 1991.
Cool. Yeah. There's all kinds of testimony you could be making, I guess. You know, somebody saying they knew somebody back in the 80s isn't very. I mean, where was he the next 20 years?
Well, there's a rich and complex backstory for this guy. I mean, including his parents and everything. I mean, is this all just some sort of huge contrivance, just so that Kurt Cobain could run away from something which is not clearly defined?
Do you believe in the witness protection program?
I do.
Okay. Well, all I'm claiming is that they performed a methodology of no different than what the witness protection program would do. And I can even give you a great incentive, like, you know, when a famous person dies, their record sales go up massively.
Sure, but he won't get any of that, really.
Well, his family, his daughter will, you know, his family will.
Or Rivers Cuomo
right?
get any of Kurt Cobain's royalties?
I mean, if they're not really enemies, then if it's his family's money, it's no different than his money. If they're still on good terms.
Kurt Cobain's royalties are in an estate and they're accounted for. None of them are going to Rivers Cuomo.
Okay.
Also, in the witness protection program, what you do is you take someone who's in deep, deep trouble, or usually running away from something, and you give them another ID, and you tuck them away somewhere. What you don't do is you don't give them a famous ID. You give them a discreet ID, because giving them a famous ID is a preposterous thing to do if you're trying to hide someone.
Yeah, and if he's like, I'm going to go around telling people that I got my notebook back. I don't know. That seems like.
Well, I'm not saying he's trying to hide. That wasn't my claim. It was just that they very simply have the technology and means to perform, you know, this kind of activity where you're giving people a backstory, you're giving them family members, you're giving them papers, you're giving them a new identity in the public eye.
You've got to pretend that all the people in River Cuomo's backstory, are all agents and lying or just made up.
Well, I don't know how much they do know, but I do know that there are people involved that must know, necessarily because he goes on tour with the same people. For example, David Grohl, who he played Nirvana with, they performed many tours, not just David Grohl, but many of the other band members and friends that Nirvana used to tour with. They still tour together often. And you can find them hanging out no different as if he was his old self. same group of friends, same business activities, same skill. Okay. And when I do a comparison between both of the people, I'm able to find the same veins, the same ligament insertion into the bone where the muscle inserts. You find all the same characteristics that go far beyond what would be considered a twin, as if it was the same exact flesh and blood. Now, when I combine that with the other parts of the face, for example, you can find what appears to be very minor plastic surgery, like to get rid of the butt chin, or to either create or get rid of like an earlobe. But other than that, the inner ear cartilage is identical. So they didn't perform a complete transformation, just a partial.
What about the pictures of Cuomo, for example, from 1997? Should we just reject those outright?
I've already explained that. If you actually look at any identifiable evidence of Rivers Cuomo before the transition, you will find that they are manipulated images.
Riggs, there's nothing manlier than a butt chin, especially with a stash.
Well, I think it's possible, and this just goes towards the whole cult claim I made earlier, possible that Kurt Cobain's a woman, and that his wife was a man, and Yasuke can probably support that a little bit more than I can. But these, like I said, these are inverted families, and they follow inverted cults. So a lot of the people in music are like this.
So we got band Weezer. They got on setlist.fm. They got concerts going back to March 1992. Hundreds of them. Who was singing in that period?
I don't know. He would have had as much time as necessary to plan his evacuation from his old self. So, if he was making music before, or
so if I can find a date when Weezer were playing a concert and Nirvana were playing a concert on the same night in different cities, what should we make of that?
I think there's one, but I dare you to find the evidence of it. Because I ran into this issue before, actually, and I'm glad you brought it up. There was a situation where I found this type of argument taking place where both people were at the same place at the same time. And, for example, there's a picture of a very famous princess that was with the New Identity in the same photo. But it's the only photo, and there's no other corroborating evidence that it was real. And furthermore, you could look closer and find out that the New Identity actually has a sharper resolution in the photograph than anything else in the frame, as if it was out of place and just placed there to look legitimate. So these are the kinds of tactics that are used to confuse people. They're able to convince people that there is enough substantial evidence to not make the comparison at all and to help find it silly, so that people don't actually take the consideration. It's a very simple pattern.
Yasuke's entered something that's related to this, saying Billie Eilish talked about having a stunt double play her for the entirety of a concert set and nobody knew.
It's very common. Doubles, stand-ins, presidents will often have, dummies and all kinds of people in masks and things to keep them safe, to cause confusion. If somebody's possibly thinking about being an enemy.
In the same way that there's probably about 1 million people in the world that can do a indistinguishable Trump impression at this point, in terms of the accent, the mannerisms of speaking, the little tics in the facial movement with that. So in that case, in order for somebody to be able to play a convincing Trump, they would just have to roughly have the same similar frame in terms of like height and skeletal structure. And then all you'd have to do for having somebody play Trump as an example is just wear a fat suit. And then, and like Billie Eilish as an example, often wears very baggy clothes. So like that would be another example to where it's even not like more obvious to have it be more difficult to find tells.
Great point.
Right.
Yeah,
So
there's also things like stuttering and handwriting analysis. Like none of these things are off the table. And then when we look for very particular markers, like I don't know, being vegan, for example, we end up finding the same exact characteristic on both sides, pretty much every time that we make these kinds of claims.
It's just one of those things to where I take it from the perspective that, like, going from my strongest examples, which would be like David Bowie and Michael Jackson doing their own eulogy. And when there's precedent for that being done once or twice, that's really all that's needed in terms of there's a certain level of infrastructure that would be required if, like, this being much more of a normie conspiracy that like David Bowie or Michael Jackson faked their death because they wanted to get out of the public spotlight. But in the sense of, like, if you really think about like how many people would have to know and how many people would potentially be sort of like in on it, as soon as there are examples of this happening once or twice, like really any other option is sort of on the table in that sense. And there's no reason to believe that if a wild, fantastical thing has happened multiple times, twice, that no reason to expect that it hasn't been a common trend that has happened even more times.
What do you think, Rich? Just opening the floor for rebuttals, because your main point there is if we've seen it done before, then larger scales or longer lasting deceptions become plausible, perhaps even probable, right?
Yeah, because if you're starting from a baseline hatchling type, it can be hard to see, oh, think about everybody that would have to be involved in like Michael Jackson faking his death or something. Like there's really a lot of people that would know. And if he's going on CNN and doing his own eulogy, LARPing as this Dave character, then that, like, there's an even larger amount of people who would have to know. So if there's examples of it happening once or twice, then that shows that the mechanisms are possible for it to happen. And once the mechanisms are possible and that it has been done, which shows that there's nothing in like the character of these institutions to not do these things, then that opens the floor for them to be done, dozens and dozens of times.
So what are the examples of it that it did work? You're saying the one of Billie Eilish, I think, is a good one. So I've read that article here for people who don't know it. Coachella in 2022, she dressed in a mask and a wig and a baggy jacket, dressed up one of her backup dancers so that she then put on high vis so she could move through the crowd and get to the next performing spot without anybody knowing that she was walking among them.
Yeah, I mean, I think the most straightforward example of this being done is David Bowie, guy named Jack Steven, who very, very scarce resources on this person existing anytime before, not really been like particularly a public figure, comes on, has exactly the same face as David Bowie, has the exact same very specific tics, like David Bowie, generally considered a very eccentric person. There are ways that he speaks that are very, very unique to him. And then also, one of the most hilarious things is like, The first thing that he says in this, when it cuts to him, is, when David Bowie died, I felt that a part of me had died. And it's just like, okay, yeah, I believe you. When David Bowie died, a part of you died.
Dump, how's he going to say something?
I was going to say, going back to December of 1993, Weezer were doing their US tour, and Nirvana were doing their In Utero LP tour, and on countless days are in completely disparate cities in the US performing. Can't be the same guy.
You would be right in the sense that it could not be the same literal flesh and blood person.
What it could be is two singers, professional singers in two bands that kind of look a bit like each other but got nothing in common.
Well, yeah, I'm just talking about I'm not even necessarily affirming this case, because it's just not my argument, not my place. But in the sense of, in the context of it already being demonstrated as like a public thing, it's perfectly okay to say is that Billie Eilish had a stunt double that went on a concert stage, and everybody was none the wiser. Everybody thought, hey, this is Billie Eilish. So in that sense, the mechanisms are already possible to have, somebody who is convincing enough to play Billie Eilish, which could be Billie Eilish, and then somebody who's convincing enough to play Billie Eilish, who is not Billie Eilish, can be in two separate spots at the same time.
Isn't new. It highlights how perception can be manipulated. What else do you think is hidden behind the curtain of celebrity?
So that just shows that the mechanisms are possible. Not even necessarily that it is what happened, just that the case of these two people being in disparate areas isn't explicitly a disqualifier.
I think you can always solve that problem by just doubling the number of doubles, right? If somebody can pretend to be somebody else, then somebody else can pretend to be them when they're at two places.
Yeah. I put forth that there's probably quite a few people that can play a whole bunch of different roles. In that, I wouldn't be surprised in this mechanism that there are certain people that can play a couple dozen different roles. And that they're just there when they need them. And there can be multiple actors playing the same character.
Billie Eilish in interviews has discussed what happened at Coachella 2022. She had a double on stage. She had a double on stage during one of the intros, but she wasn't actually singing. The stunt double wasn't singing. She came through the crowd. She used a stunt double to dress like her while she went to other bands. There's no one performing as her.
Spazaki, let's not double down here.
Yeah, this is where I would go into the whole Trump thing, in that being able to convincingly sound indistinguishable from Trump. A lot of people can do that. I would say there's probably 1 million people. There's people in China who sound exactly like Trump.
To be honest, Billie Eilish's double didn't sound like Billie Eilish because she wasn't utilized to invoke any to vocals.
Yeah. So I'm giving you the other example of going back to the Trump thing is that there are, I would say, 1 million people in the world, because it's just popular person, distinguishable voice, funny to parody. It's funny to parody Trump. So in that sense, 1 million people who could make a convincing Trump impersonation in terms of speaking voice, vocal tics, body mannerisms, those kind of things. So then all that it would take would be somebody who's, a 6'1" male, who'd be able to wear a skin suit or something. And then they'd be indistinguishable from that.
Sure.
I'm not even asserting that, any particular thing. I'm just stating that it is, whether or not it is possible. Because if it happened and if it's possible, these are two different things. Because it can be possible for this to happen, but not happen in one specific case or another.
So the core question seems to be, do we think that we can extend that principle out to be basically an entire life? Somebody sort of lives as somebody else rather than being as somebody else for a concert. That's what Melissa's saying in chat. There's a big leap from a temporary stunt double and completely taking over someone's life.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this does have to invoke that it's more than just the specific singers that are in on it. And that it does have to fundamentally come down to some like particular bloodline level, which my model already has a mechanism to make that work. Whereas a lot of other people, even people that do subscribe to this theory, don't have those mechanisms. So that would be a hole that could poke into other conventions of the same theory.
I mean, the only way the Weezer Nirvana transition takes place is if you at least agree that Weezer were a touring entity at the same time as Nirvana. There was someone headlining the Weezer and singing on stage with a unique presence and identity in the media, and also to all the concert players and on albums, who at some point, at Kurt Cobain's whim, decided to just either plan to do that all along, or just was forced to relinquish that role. What do you do with that person, so that Kurt Cobain can switch roles? Which means it would have to have substantive amounts of pre-planning, or it would involve murdering someone.
Yeah, I mean, this would be where it's like the whole funny thing with like Kash Patel telling like there's a connection that people have made of Kash Patel telling Charlie Kirk, see you in Valhalla. Which one is weird because he's a Christian person, but then two, just on the idea of apparently there being some specific place that is called Valhalla, that is alleged to be a place where these kind of people hang out. Like the normie view might be that, this is where Tupac and Biggie are hanging out in, Puerto Rico or something. But that's not a much more like normie tier conspiracy.
I don't know. A lot of the time, these sound like it sounds like an awful amount of effort to put these things in place.
Yeah, this is where I generally talk about economies of scale, in that for these things to work, they essentially have to be industrialized processes, to where there's an entire industry around them that has a 360 view to make them work. And in that sense, if you had this massive, giant network and infrastructure, all for the purposes of hiding one or two people that, fake off themselves, then that's not very efficient. Whereas adding another person from going from 1000 to 1001 is trivial, in terms of you don't actually need to add any more infrastructure to go from 1,000 people to one person. But to go from 0 people to 1 people is like infinitely larger, like several orders of magnitude larger.
Can you make a distinction between the hundreds of people that die that arguably are now someone else, and the hundreds of people who are celebrities who go on to be very old and very wrinkly and don't go for this transition? What's the distinction?
I'm not understanding.
Well, I mean, there's a mechanism in play where a whole cohort of famous people at some juncture at the peak, usually at the peak of their careers, and quite often at a time in their life when it would be untimely for people to normally die, go through this transitional mechanism, a la Kurt Cobain to Rivers Cuomo, for example. Yeah, there's some mechanism in play there that's enacted. Why can you explain or distinguish between why that happens to a cohort of people, like whether it be Jim Morrison, Hendrix, all the people we can invoke in this sense? I'm sure there's equivalent conspiracies for those people. Why some of those people have to engage in that process, but clearly some famous people don't. They get old and crusty and they don't change. And they don't have to suddenly disappear and be replaced by someone else.
Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. Now I understand what you mean. Now I get it. This is where there's 1,000 different examples that I could use, but I'll just use like Charlie Kirk as an example. So just taking this premise, it's not about whether or not it's true. It's just operating within the framework, right? Is there being a 1998 Nicolas Cage movie called Snake Eyes, where essentially like dozen plus details on Charlie Kirk's death were like invoked in that movie. It being the same date, September 10th, Tyler the Executioner, a Republican political figure named Charles Kirkland, getting assassinated by a bullet from range. So many details within this to where it'd be incredulous to say that it wasn't some level of predictive programming. Then it would go into like, all right, so wait, they planned Charlie Kirk's death when he was 8 years old? Like that doesn't necessarily follow. So then it would go into that in the same way that when you have, you know, actors on a stage playing characters, that when you bring in what's the guy's name? The guy that Sean Bean played in Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, etc., etc. Everybody knows that he's going to die at some point. It's sort of predestined that he's going to die. So in the same sense, when like they're planning on bringing this Charlie Kirk character onto the stage, same thing with, you know, this Kurt Cobain character, anybody else who's in the 27 Club, famous, rich musicians, etc., who died when they were 26 in the prime of their lives. It's like a common Hollywood term. All of these people would essentially have had their, like, quote unquote, deaths be planned part of the kayfabe, planned part of the script. So there are some characters that are not meant to have a lambastic death, and some that are.
Okay, but that's still not distinguishing between them. That's just saying some do and some don't.
I mean, I would just say the distinction is that, you know, there's some character. The world is a stage. The world is professional wrestling. The world is a theater. And what's it called?
The difference lies in narrative
Cersei
purpose.
Lannister
Some deaths serve dramatic
was
arcs,
predestined
others
to
maintain
die
the
at a
status
certain
quo.
point by
What
the script
drives that
writers.
choice?
So she dies because that's what the plan was all along. And then somebody else whose character wasn't planned on having a long death, like there was nothing to really do with having this person die that had any sort of like meaning to pull on the heartstrings or do whatever a theater production would do to have, you know, character plot beats, breakpoints. So it's really just some characters die because the script writers want them to die in a particular way, and that's how the story is set up.
Sure. I mean, I understand. In talking about the Snake Eyes film with a character called Charles Kirkland who gets shot, assassinated. He's not a political protagonist. He's not he's at a boxing match. He gets shot by a terrorist, and also the bullet grazes a character called Julia in it. Where's the grazed character in the analogy for Charlie Kirk?
I mean, that would go into like not everything needs to be necessarily one-to-one.
Just some
or
to some.
maybe
Just some to some's enough, is it?
Yeah, I mean, if it was going to be every single detail, it would be a character named Charlie Kirk on a college campus doing a event, and the person said counting or not counting gang violence before they got shot. So in that sense, like you wouldn't have in like commonly talked about point is like 9/11 predictive programming, in that essentially every single detail of the 9/11 attacks, date, time, like every single little detail of things that happened that morning were shown in media, you know, dozens and dozens of times. Specifically 9/11, 2001, everything in that sense. But every single little bits and piece of media, under the idea that this is some level of predictive programming, isn't going to have every single detail be one-to-one accurate. Otherwise, it just would be a movie that is, oh, hey, this is 9/11 2001, and it's a movie that comes out in 1998.
Sure.
It has yeah.
That maybe the world is, we're living in a world where you type in Charlie Kirk or Charles Kirk into a search engine, it takes you straight to Snake Eyes. And people just draw the analogy because the names are similar. Maybe we live in that world, yeah.
Yeah, I mean that would just go into whatever your threshold is for kind of taking the idea of whether or not you would write something off as pareidolia. Because I mean, in theory, everybody should be able to agree that there comes a certain point in pattern recognition that it becomes not pareidolia. That there's a certain point where it comes to so many things being the same that it becomes difficult to say that it was just random chance.
What else is there in the film Snake Eyes that is analogous to the scenario around the death of Charlie Kirk, other than the names having some etymological relativity?
Yeah, I don't remember every single specific detail on it. This was something from 3 years ago. When Charlie Kirk died 3 years ago.
But if you look at but I'm sure if you looked at the film Snake Eyes, 98% of it can't be. It's a mystery thriller. It's a Brian De Palma film, yeah, starring Nicolas Cage. Where's the Nicolas Cage protagonist in all of this? This is the thing. You can look. If I look for Charles Kirk or Charlie Kirk online, I can find things, and I can find some protagonist in the film that says he shot. But Charles Kirk is actually one of the largest manufacturers and producers of schoolwear in England. What's the connection there?
Yeah, I mean, there might be connections, there might not be. I don't necessarily know. But my point is that there's a certain point of level of connections and specificity that often when this point is ever argued about in terms of predictive programming, of there being there's so many details that relate to this one event that was from a movie 2 years or so before it. The movie Contagion has a coronavirus that came from a wet market in Wuhan. And there was a black woman and a Jew who saved everybody with a vaccine. Obviously, the last part is a little jokey, but point is that whenever this point is argued about in terms of predictive programming, the answer that I commonly come to is that there's no level of connections that are similar between one piece of media and one real world event that could ever possibly have a connection. There's no level of burden of proof of connection between these two events that could get somebody's head scratching to say, hey, maybe there is a connection there.
There isn't a wet farm in Contagion. There's a pig.
I'm sorry?
There's a pig on a farm. It's not a wet farm.
I didn't say a wet farm.
In Contagion? There's an infection from a agriculturally manufactured animal that makes its way into a restaurant. But where's the restaurant scenario in the COVID story?
I'm doing a quick check on that.
From what I'm seeing in the movie Contagion, it was from a bat.
Yeah, a bat infected a pig. Yeah, but we know. But the reason that's in the story is that's not just a contrivance in the story. There's a history in virology of understanding that there's animal cross contagion causes mutations in viruses. That's long established and understood. before that film in 2011, and indeed COVID-19, which is why it's a major source of investigation. It's because someone's evaluated it before COVID-19 and created a scenario in a film called Contagion. Doesn't mean to say it's necessarily it's a narrative to play out in the reality, is it?
Yeah, and this just goes back into my point that, like, one is that there's like enough connections, as in not literally every single detail is the same, and you did rightfully point out that there are some details that are not exactly the same as the like original story that we're given about the real event. But in that same sense, this goes back into the point that I was saying, is that whenever it comes to connecting any predictive programming event as a possibility, like even a chance that there's some connection between this predictive programming event and a real world event, there's no level of connections and similarities that gets to the point to where I could ever convince like the royal you that there might be some connection there. Like there's no level of similarities unless it's literally one for one, like a 9/11 documentary coming out in 2000 or in 1998 that has literally the exact same footage from BBC that morning.
What about the idea that Steven Soderbergh, who was the main driving force behind that film, who'd worked on previous films with Scott Z. Burns, who was a screenwriter, discussed the idea that they should make a film about the rapid spread of a virus, and Burns, being the diligent man that he was, consulted with representatives of the WHO as well as medical experts to get a realistic and coherent understanding of how cross-contamination between animal sources in the real world and agriculture could manifest as a virus which could propagate across the world. Based upon the fact that the World Health Organization had been evaluating this as it's been playing out in the real world for 20 years beforehand, just to give the film some realism. Isn't that a hell of enough explanation why there might be some parallels between the film and the reality? And again, clearly some parallels, but a whole load that aren't parallels.
Yeah, so this goes into a point that I did an interview with a chap named Doran at one point. And there was a point that he brought up in our discussion about in Lord of the Rings, right? They've like seemingly adapted, everything that could be adapted. There might be some things in the Silmarillion, but that's like Rings of Power stuff. There's like one thing in Lord of the Rings specifically, not like The Hobbit or any other Middle-earth works, that hasn't been adapted. And the way that it's phrased is that like, I'm sure there's like 50 different storyboard reasons that Peter Jackson has, or like this thing or that thing for why these can't be adapted into movies, into films. Like the end of Lord of the Rings as an example. There's probably so many on the surface level justifiable reasons for why these things aren't there. And that can be, plausible enough to accept at that point. While it can also be the case that the story at the end of Lord of the Rings has not had a way to be like alchemically transmuted into something that is not what the story is actually about. Because the story that's at the end of the Lord of the Rings is something that is like particularly poignant for the modern day. And I don't personally see a way for that story to be adapted in the modern day without being inherently against what Hollywood in general tries to push.
That's an awfully long way to not address the conversation about Contagion.
Yeah, my point is that in Contagion...
Well, what I have to say about the Lord of the Rings movie starts like this. No, just...
Yeah, let's find a... I kind of want to find a Where can we get to middle of it? So it sounds like your main point, Pazza, if I'm right, is that essentially that Yasuke is not looking at the misses. He can find hits where it's like, oh, there's a bat, but claimed that it was a whole wet market sort of identical match where instead it was a sort of weaker match. You seem like you're pointing at the misses, and it seems like you're saying, Yasuke, of course there are going to be some misses, but if you look at the hits, the probability of them being able to occur is so high that it's not possible, it's by chance. Is that right? Have I summarized each person's side?
Yeah, I think you can retrospectively you can take some meta points of any event and you can feed it into the world of the internet in which we live. Charlie Kirk, Charles Kirkland. You know, so there are mechanisms in play nowadays which will propagate through concepts and constructs and metadata, and propagate that through the entire mesh of all written down and archived information, and drive you straight towards all the hit, all the positive alignment, and all the construct and narratives that fit the same. And it's an incredibly dangerous thing to do in isolation, because I mean, the whole range of questions we have to ignore. Why would, if contagion is some sort of like narrative of revelation before the time, what's its purpose? What does it aim to achieve? 10 or so years before the actual event. What's its purpose in that respect? For example, I mean, there's questions like that, but the fact that you can do that, the fact you can take Charles, Charlie, Kirk, and find other names which are a derivative of Kirk, like Kirkland. I'm sure people when they did the search for Kirk ended up trawling through Star Trek plots. I'm sure they did. They didn't find anything cohesive, then that's the end of the story. But the point is that you can do this all day and every day. It's not necessarily constructive, I don't think. It's interesting, and then there's a fascination and a curiosity in pattern matching and alignment. But does it reveal a truth? This is the question.
Yeah, so this just goes back into my point that when it's almost like whenever I discuss these things with somebody who's skeptical, it's not necessarily a skeptical level of, it's essentially a skeptical level of being entirely closed off to the idea to begin with, and that there's no level of connections between a piece of media and event that could ever even give any questions for there possibly being something. It's like the opposite of pareidolia, that the two events could be 99% similar, and then the 1% of the idea could be used to justify and say, hey, not every detail is the same, therefore they're not similar. Just like another example of a detail in like the Snake Eyes movie is that movie happens during a hurricane, the hurricane being Hurricane Jezebel, and there was a Jezebel.com, a website that writes articles, that on September 8th, 2 days before the assassination, said that wrote an article titled, "We paid some Etsy witches to curse Charlie Kirk." And, that is in isolation like, oh yeah, sure, that can be totally coincidental, but it is another connection. And there comes a certain point in which it should be incredulous to say that there is pure coincidence between these two events and their number of similarities. And with the people that I argue with this against, there is no level. There is no level of proof or connections that could possibly even get to the point of saying, hey, that's a little bit weird.
I still think we're falling back on platitudinal pattern matching rather than actually the visceral truths being revealed. I think.
Yeah, I'm trying to land. Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how we can get to that because I feel like we've given this topic a good run. It's probably time for a new topic. So I kind of want to. Can we get to the I guess a wrap up from either side on this? Because we've gone kind of from body swapping to a broad doubling campaign to the predictive programming of contagion. So who wants to wrap up on which?
So I have a good way of wrapping it up in terms of I've essentially just been defending the idea that it happens to begin with. Then there was the question that was posed at some point of like why? Why is the question? You did ask something like that, and this is where I go into sort of like Alex Jones as a example of a predictor in that Alex Jones outside of Bohemian Grove has never done a piece of conspiracy research in his life. All that he does is just read white papers that are released from government agencies, NGOs, academic papers, et cetera, et cetera. So Alex Jones says a conspiracy, and then 7 years later, it gets revealed to be true, like on the public square. So in that idea, it's the purpose of it. Like one purpose of how predictive programming can work is that Alex Jones says something crazy. People hear, oh, there's human-animal hybrids. And then when it gets revealed to be a thing 7 years later, everybody's like, oh, hey, that's kind of like the thing Alex Jones said, but not as crazy. It almost gives a level of, if it came out right away with no pre-warming up, no foreplay, then there might be much more like shocked reactions. Whereas when there's a gradual drip feed of the idea from the crazies to the slightly crazies to the not so crazies, then that allows more wild out there ideas to be accepted as mundane.
That would be great if most people, the vast majority of people, don't take events of the real world and just immediately plant them as the mundane after they've been shocked by them.
Yasuka's solo act
for most people
is
in the world,
dominating here.
For most people in the world, there doesn't have to be this contrived annealing process. They take the shock on all the world, they absorb it, what's in the news cycle, and they forget about it.
So what's your main rebuttal then? To his point, he said no specific detail matching between a movie and a real event could ever constitute sufficient evidence of a connection. What's your main rebuttal to that? So we can wrap it up.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there isn't really a rebuttal to that, is there? There's the manifest notion that these things are pantomimes that played out to anneal us or to cajole us into a mindset before things arrive. They're arguably, you can argue that, but that in and of itself, that's not the mechanism that's needed. The most majority of people won't draw the connection, so they don't. A lot of people don't see the film. So if it's a mechanism of preparing a society for a scenario before it arrives, it's a pretty rubbish one, because people make their own judgments when the situation arrives, and they don't necessarily draw the connections anyway.
Hey, Lush.
I mean, I could go.
How many?
Fine. No.
Sure. I mean, how many people have seen Snake Eyes? It's hardly up there with Apocalypse Now, is it? Or One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
And my question about Snake Eyes is, you could have predictive programming that just bizarrely ends up working the other way around. Like some kid, Tyler, happens to watch the film and it just gets in his brain, and he might not even sort of know, but for some reason, when later on, almost subconsciously, when he's choosing who to shoot, he just gets this particular bug in his brain about Charlie Kirk. So he could work any number of ways in my mind.
Yeah, the life imitating art, or the art imitating life kind of diatribe. Yeah, that's
similar to nominative determinism, where you end up with a job that's similar to your name.
Yeah, that is like.
That's just because it's a simulation.
Yeah, that's a
true.
common way that people sort of explain away all of these coincidences in a way that, like, at least it's trying to, which I give it credit for. Like, it's a much more elegant and viable solution. One is the idea that, you know, people see these things in movies and then they, like, consciously or subconsciously act them out. Or some level of, like, you know, people are, when they're making movies, they're just, like, sticking their hand out into the ether. Like, not in terms of the flat earth discussion ether, but you know what I mean. In terms of getting some idea from, you know, the collective unconscious. Those types of conceptions as a way to explain away coincidences is much more elegant.
Yeah.
Because at least it actually tries to explain it.
Well, my final thing would be here's a slightly different way of looking at this. Okay, right? Brian De Palma, who was the driving force behind the film in question. Yeah, he's got a very, very long and prolific career as a director and as a creator of movies, director and producer of movies. Okay, right? He's come up with, like say, in the late 70s, he came up with horror films like Carrie, which were pastiches of other horror films, and also a kickback against the idolized American college view of, like, the prom queen and the innocence of the college and the university life in America. He went on to make films like Scarface in the 80s, where he was literally right on the pulse of the idea that the industrial complex of drug distribution around the Americas and from Central America to North America, and how and the absurdity of the whole construct. He's made a whole load of films that evaluate just people's perceptions of society and societal constructs in his time. I mean, he's made a load of other films that are historic, and he's made loads of other films that the Mission Impossible films, which are all effectively just pastiches of the idea of James Bond agency in the modern tech. But he's always looking at he's always in all of his time from the 60s through to the modern day looked at constructs of perception of the way things work in the zeitgeist and fold them into films. So in that sense, you'd expect someone like this to think, okay, well, this is what's in the news. This is what's in the vernacular of societal vernacular. Let's investigate that as an idea, notion of a film. Let's go and pursue, make a big endeavor to make something that's factually or mechanically reflective of what actually is happening or could happening, and make a compelling film as a consequence. If you look at things like Scarface in the 80s, I mean, that film was sitting out this myopic, self-destructive notion of this rampant capitalism in the war against drugs and the drug industries across America, and how that played out. These sort of films are all the work of a man who's literally on the pulse of where society is, or where culture is, and where it's going, and reflecting that as vociferous as he can in cinematography. So it's hardly surprising that films like Contagion come out of that.
Trying to sort of demonstrate, trying to replicate what we do see in reality. That's good.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think we can move on to a new, but we'll sort of segue out of that. I want to point out before we move on that Sage is leaning con here. It's interesting. The note sizing is actually backwards from what she says on the Viz. But she said that it was rebutted and not covered. The wet market claim is what she's called it on. So she's called it on Paz's side.
For what it's worth.
Failed to re-update the notes. You can see up the top there. But you can also ask, we can ask for, can we have a judgment on that debate, please, about the Contagion film and predictive programming, please, Sage?
Wait.
Come again.
Wait. The Contagion part was just like a small little detail of the overarching argument.
It was. That's fair.
That's true. That's true. So how would you describe the overall argument? And she might be able to do a semantic search back far enough. She won't be able to show it on the board, but she can show it in the side chat if you describe
pick
it
a framework,
well.
Yusuke. I'm not bothered.
Yeah. I would generally say the conversation in scope was about whether or not there is viability in the concept of predictive programming in media being something that happens or not.
Okay. Could you give us a debate judgment on considering that as the topic, please, Sage? That'll take
Insufficient context.
That's fine. That's fine.
It's
I
about
would
predictive
say
programming in general, Sage.
yes.
Hmm.
I would say one thing to your point, Pazza, that's outside of the scope of the talk, because I'm not trying to get
The
back into
current
the same
topic is about
topic.
predictive programming
is
in media,
that
specifically
among
relating to
movie
films like
buffs,
Contagion and their potential
There's a
connections
common
to
trend.
real-world
This
events.
is not a conspiratorial point at all. Is that it's very often for when people find a particular director very interesting and they're really, really into this one particular director, they often point out that one movie or another in their library, their works, seems to almost not be a movie that's directed by them, or that they had significantly less control over one of their movies or another.
Sure.
And that's not a conspiratorial point. That's just that could just be as simple as, the studio didn't give as much leeway. There was a producer that was really nosy that wanted things a particular way for one reason or another.
Yeah, that's true. I'll concede that's the case. I mean, for De Palma, I talked about Carrie, which is obviously a Stephen King novel. Not a lot of wiggle room there in terms of plot narrative. I think Scarface is Oliver Stone, isn't it? Scarface, is it Oliver Stone? I think it is. One of his. He was massively prolific at the time, but again, Oliver Stone was exactly the same. He's one of those people who was compelling because he was looking at the framework of what was going on politically and culturally, and jumping the gun, so to speak, and saying, well, what if this was to be the outcome, or what if this is the manifest consequence of these directions? And I think this is the thing about looking at films and looking at novels and going, well, look, this is almost insightfully told before us. It's because this is what makes entertainment and media so compelling when it's done properly. Is that people are supposed to not just retrospective cinematography and literature is all well and good, but those who can prophesize are based upon the trends in the modern age and try to extrapolate where things are going. They're the guys that end up being the ones that resonate with people as they look into the world and look where it may be going. But I grant there are parallels. There are always parallels.
Right. So let's find a new topic. There was ones on Israel. Somebody said evolution before. Has Rich still here? No. We had some for Israel. There's flat Earth. Does God exist? Does communism work? Is it immoral to own a cat? Is it immoral to own a purebred animal, dog? Or what would segue out of the last?
Yeah, who wants the mantle? Come on, one side or the other.
You're doing well.
I just have an interesting point. Hopefully somebody can disagree with me on it.
Go for it.
Is that there's a lot of statistical fallacies, right? A lot of ways that are codified versions of misinterpreting a piece of data that have names for it because it happens so often and people have created names for it. There's one particular fallacy that I've looked around, and as far as I can tell, it is not codified. Yet it is absolutely a fallacy that has no name. I would posit into calling it the inception baseline fallacy. which is giving a couple examples. I wrote it down somewhere. Okay, I'll find it. So, according to modern history as we understand it in the Americas, American settlers from Europe found 100 million buffalo on the continent before. And we've all kind of just assumed that it was always like that. Standard history states that the natives were wiped out by disease, so that when the Europeans came, just empty, right? And with the natives having been wiped out due to disease, that wipes out the biggest predator of the buffalo. When the primary predator of a particular animal is no longer present in an ecosystem, this allows the buffalo population to rise to a dramatically unnaturally high level. So because we've only tracked how many buffalo there were when Europeans first came to America, there is the assumption based off of the first data point that it backtracked into infinity, that there always were 100 million buffalo. Another example would be tracking the amount of women who died during childbirth. This happened during the start of like the particular industry of medical practices used in the 1800s, where we now know that many of these practices actively aided in the increase of deaths, such as morticians being the ones delivering babies and not washing their hands, going from dead body to baby. Like, we understand that a lot of the things that were done at the origins of that field caused way more deaths. And so when we make a historical claim about how many people died in childbirth, the earliest hard data we have is at that one very specific viewpoint. So it's easy to backtrack and make the claim that for all of history, 30% of women have died in childbirth, which that is a statistic from this very specific time set that is assumed to backtrack ad infinitum. Observing health trends from the start of record keeping during the Industrial Revolution, which would have been considered a uniquely unsanitary and unhealthy time, because this is after you have the destruction of the society that existed before, where there's like a lot of more traditional practices that understood some level of basic hygiene. And it was before the industrial processes had regulations which stopped, you know, all of these pollutants and everything from being everywhere.
Yasuka's monologue is
so my
expansive
argument
now.
is that this is a statistical fallacy of taking the first observed data point and assuming that it backtracks into infinity. There's no word for this, yet it absolutely exists.
Yeah, it's sort of how do you read trends?
Yeah.
But do you
And,
think it
like,
would really go into infinity? Like there's just always been that many? I would have thought you'd rightly predict that they are going to be fluctuating based on predation.
I've commonly heard in many different circles the 100 million buffalo thing quoted, and I've never heard the context of talking about how, you know, natives being wiped out would have been a massive factor towards there being that many. Whenever it's talked about, it's always talked about that, you know, implication being that there's always been 100 million buffalo in America until, you know, Europeans came.
So what does it say here? I'm Googling it. Pre-19th century, 30 to 60 million vast herds roamed across North America, stretching from Alaska to Mexico. They were foundational ecosystems in the Great Plains and the cultural and physical survival of many indigenous nations. Late 19th century, down to 1,000. Over history, pre-19th century. Based on historical observations and ecological modelling rather than scientific counts. 25 to 60 million. So are you suggesting that the white man arrives, gives all of the natives smallpox, they all die off, and then the buffalo populations explode to 60 million? Because I would have thought that would take a fair bit of time with a slow gestating mammal like a bison. That's going to take a generation or two, right? They're in gestation for like, a good few months. They're like a couple of years old before they give birth. They're not like bugs, right? With bugs, if you sort of stop spraying them within a year or two, you've just got a swarm. Whereas with the bigger the animal, the longer it takes to bounce back generally. Don't you think?
Yeah, this would go into like in nature, like let's say, a buffalo has X amount of babies. I don't actually know, let's just say like 5 in a particular gestation period. Gestation period probably be we actually get numbers here, right?
Who wants to take this? Yasuke is saying, I don't think there's anybody defending it though. Like I would easily believe that their estimates are off and the complexity of the ecosystem didn't make sense to early white settlers, and even that their counts would have been really difficult. Like I've fenced animals into a yard and tried to count them and found that difficult, let alone ones roaming the plains.
Yeah, so it'd be about 12 months between pregnancies. So going from one pregnancy to another. And what would it be? Okay, so water buffalo they all generally tend to have one calf. Okay. But under some conceptions of when that old world disease kind of happened would have been 1492 or something like that, in terms of the origin of the spread of the disease. And a lot of the Americas wasn't really observed until 1700. So good solid 200 something year period. I would say would be enough time to, if you're going from effectively, 1 TFR to, 7 or 8 TFR, because there's absolutely no meaningful predators that can destroy a buffalo herd. That would infinitely expand the population.
Yeah, there's not many other, what would there be? Mountain lions aren't very good at hunting in packs and aren't where they are. They wouldn't have many other predators, sure. But how quick? So you're suggesting their population can explode? How quickly, though?
We're taking a point of 200 years, and if you're increasing the TFR, yeah. So 1492 is the
1700. I see what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah. So that point with having several children who then go on to have children in 200 years, you could probably quadruple, quintuple, 4x, 5x your population within a 200-year frame.
Yeah, it would. I would guess I would also need to see how many people are getting killed from 1492.
Yeah, that's something in terms of in modern history, how fast the disease spreaded is not a known thing, because the entire premise of it is that it is unknown data. The people go into the Americas and they see nothing. Those people could have died. If somebody's coming in 1650, those people could have died a year ago, or they could have died, 100 years ago. Yeah, the only people that argue with me about this are the people that want to argue with me about everything. And if I say something, then it must be wrong.
Yeah, I can't see any takers for that. Because I think that we could get it wrong is more probable than not.
So, the way that this is commonly used, so I'll try to find a way to make it more contentious. The way that it's commonly used in, let's say, health conditions, in terms of record keeping first being done at the Industrial Revolution, very dirty time. The start of tracking mortality of mothers during childbirth being when these things were very much there. They're almost, the way that these are actually used de facto is to say that everything was so much worse in the past. And they're using this snapshot, this baseline inception of everything being as bad as it was during the 1850s, when these things would have made it significantly worse at that time. Whereas if people had the conception that, okay, maybe there weren't that many mothers that died, it wasn't 30% of mothers dying in childbirth, that would lessen the impact of the idea that we're so much better in modern times. And with this being such a, in isolation, simple concept to understand, I don't understand why it's not codified as a statistical fallacy. And I could, well, let's just say I'm making the argument that the reason it's not codified is that the most common way that it would be used is to look at data from 1850 to 1900 and then say, hey, this data actually isn't representative of the past. Therefore, our conceptions about what the world was before, all this cool stuff happened versus now, it's not actually that much better to the degree that it's claimed to be.
But what do you base that on?
Which
I
part?
think stuff was pretty shitty in the past. I wouldn't pick a time to swap with. I think the best you get is hunter-gatherers, and then you're dying violently all the time. But every step in between seems like an absolute fucking nightmare.
Yeah, I mean, this goes into proportionality. Is that, let's say right now 1% of women die in childbirth. It's probably going to be less than that, but let's just say 1%. And people are told that it's 30% of women in all of history died in childbirth. Well, let's say the number was 10%, right? It's still a lot, but it's significantly less than, you having 3 sisters and one of them is guaranteed to die of childbirth, statistically speaking.
Yeah, it's 1 in 10, but it's 10 times higher.
Yeah. Well, it's 1 in 10 versus
1 in 100 sisters, or 1 in 10, or 1 in 3.
Yeah. So in that sense, the perception of the past and the trade-offs, while you could still even say that, oh, hey, yeah, it was bad in the past, it wasn't that bad. And the idea of saying that the past was you had 8 children and one of them were likely to survive to actually have, offspring. If there's some hyper dramatized view that is the extreme example, say, some people are successful and have 15 kids, it's likely that only one of them survive, then that perception of the past is going to influence people pretty dramatically over, a 10% figure or something like that.
I don't understand the point. I feel like what you're doing is saying there are people out there who have this thought that I think is silly, and I think we need to find the people in here that we can disagree with. Because if you're saying there are people out there who have a misunderstanding of what life was like in the past, that's something we aren't going to be able to get to the bottom of. Whereas if you're saying I think we need to find somebody here in the room that has that position, or finds a position that somebody in the room does have. Because I think you're right, there are going to be some people who get it wrong, but if they're not, we're not here to talk to them. We're just talking to you about what these mysterious people might think. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah. On that point, there's 2 things. One is that I'm more or less just talking to talk in order to elaborate on the thought, actually vocalize it so that it's much more concrete the next time that I think about it. Like that's just a valuable thing to do. But then also, I would argue that everybody has that level of bias in them in terms of like perception about the past. And it can be to one degree or another, but I think that it's something that generally everybody has, and it's just a question of degrees.
Yeah. So, and the question is like, would you swap for in the past? Almost, was it how bad was it? Is that the question we're asking?
Well, that would be one question that you could take as the question of trade-offs, right? Is that if you take the conception of like pre-industrial England, to where you and your father and your father's father and your father's father's fathers all worked in the same profession, and everybody in your community has known each other for hundreds of years, there would be a non-zero amount of people who would make the trade-off to live in that conception. If it was, instead of 30% mortality, it was 10% or something like that.
Well, the mortality for childbirth in women was only like less than 1%, just to be more specific, because you're throwing around 10 and 30%, like it's a big number. But when you actually look at the numbers of women dying from childbirth like 200 to 500 years ago, it's only 1%.
Yeah, that's what I think the number is, but I'm using like a larger number because it's more useful to illustrate the point that I'm making.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, it's good to be specific.
Because I thought it was, oh my God, of mortality.
Also, another point I forgot to add, like most women got multiple children, let's say 5 to 8 to 12. Every single child that you get is a multiplier for the risk of her dying. So, for example, a woman who had, like, let's say 5 children, that mortality rate might be 5 to 8% versus the 0.5 to 1% for the first child. So there's a few notes to know.
Yeah, so I've just Googled it, said that, pre-industrial populations, maternal mortality is 1 to 1.5 per birth, while up to 50% of all children died before reaching adulthood. Fuck. That's a lot of babies in the ground.
I mean, that's a bigger one to talk about, because women actually weren't that much in danger.
Right. Yeah, I thought the woman stood a far bigger risk pre hand washing and stuff. That if she just got a bleed, she was done for.
Yeah. So if we're taking that one concept, like that's a much more dramatic difference in terms of, going from 30% to 1%. And if we're taking it from the modern lens, we understand that, not hand washing, et cetera, would make it be really, really bad. But then, like, there's this one communist midwife wrote some books in like the 60s to the 90s who did like 1,000 or so childbirths in like these commune style places, and was open to the idea of transferring them to a hospital if something went wrong. And the total amount that had to be transferred to a hospital, like having complications to that degree, out of the 1,000 plus childbirths that she did, was 0. So it'd be just in that conception that, like, there are certain things that might be done in the standard like the one thing that's commonly talked about is that the way that women are positioned on like the birthing table is not it's not the most effective way to actually get a baby pushed out versus like
down on all four.
Versus getting down on all fours or being in more of like a squat position. So in that sense, that's something that would invite complications over.
There's a fuel gas train. Yeah.
Say again?
I'm talking to myself. Sorry.
Oh, good.
Yeah, that would be a point. Is that like, okay, if I could either live in today or live in 1600s England,
Fuck no. Jesus,
and like
no.
and if I had my mind, right? Because if I don't have my mind, then I'm not the same person, obviously.
Yeah, but I also think you've got to roll the dice that you are like, fine, I get to pick England, but I have equal probability being any person within England. So the chance of being the king is approaching zero.
Yeah, I wouldn't be a king. I wouldn't be a king.
1 or 2%.
Yeah, odds are
middle class 3 to 4%. The chance of being a serf is like the rest of it.
Yeah, odds are I'd be like, a serf in a village, in a community with, families who've known each other for, 300-400 years. I'd probably be in some kind of trade, like, blacksmithing or farming or one thing or another. And so if I had my current mind, right, and it's like, all right, the only thing that I have to do is tell people to wash their hands and boil their water, and we'd probably cut infant mortality down, like, by 90-something%.
Right, but you know what happens. Go on, Tim.
No, it was just a little joke. I can wait.
I was gonna make a joke too. I was gonna say, you know what happens to people who successfully protect babies? You're gonna get fucking burned, bro.
And I wanted to say that you had to carve into stone. Invest into Bitcoin.
Yes. True.
Just leave some tidbits around the corner, like so people can find them. Invest in Google.
No. So I'm going to write something that says that Charlie Kirk's murder was faked. Going back to the previous conversation.
Yeah. Hello, Andy.
So yeah, because I think the question we're asking, Andy, welcome, is would you swap for someone? If you would swap, would you swap for a random person in the 1600s? Or what if we did this? If you could pick the 1600s and you get to pick which person, so you get to be the Duke of Gloucester or something like that, would you swap? Because I think no. I don't think, because the higher up you go in the hierarchy, I think I would be the king, and then the chance that my siblings want to murder me is suddenly real high. And then,
I mean, if I wanted to go
he still has
to
to shit in the bucket too. He still has gets goiters or whatever they are, has all these weird medical conditions that he can't do anything about. Like Henry VIII had that giant suppurating wound on his leg that just never went away. He get impaled or something on a boar hunt, and was in agony with a stinking leg wound for the rest of his life.
Yeah, if I was in 1600s England, I would just rather be a serf.
But I think their life would have been fairly miserable too. There would have been, firstly, just not in charge of your own destiny. Your overall outlook on life would have been this tiny little village, this confusing, misunderstanding world with no scientific understanding, no opportunities for greatness or travel or adventure. Just a lifetime of feeding these royals.
I mean, I would just say to think about all of the positives as well, in terms of just most people don't know their neighbors today. And it can be hard to understand the value in seeing, oh, hey, my neighbors are somebody who, their great-great-grandparents knew my great-great-grandparents.
Yeah.
Like that is something that is, it's one of those things that if you haven't experienced, it can be hard to actually understand how valuable it is.
I agree with that. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I live in a street now where all our neighbours know one another, and we're on a group and we say hi in the street, and we went on a trip together with some of the boys, and yeah, beautiful.
Plus,
I'm just trying to get a debate going, so you step up, Andy.
I was going to say there can be peace in knowing your place. I think that's the problem with a lot of women. They don't know the place.
A lot of women like Shaq.
Them's fight words. Is Melissa still here?
No.
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, shit.
Let's avoid placing women in boxes.
I was joking.
Wow.
Yeah, if Melissa was here when I was going to pick a topic, I should have just said, like, people who wear yoga pants should be executed or something. Get that topic going.
So go on, somebody start us. Or we can sort of, I think this one about history is interesting because I still, would you swap? Who would swap for somebody in the past? Somebody else step up and let's take this, find some productive disagreement.
Yeah, I'm thinking about there's so much more I can do today as an average person than the king. I could fly first class in a jet if I wanted, go skydiving in the Grand Canyon. Like, there is a whole lot more in the world that's easier for me to do than the king or the Duke of Gloucester, right? Like, the things that I can see they would enjoy, like being powerful, power tripping, having an ego. That's what I can't do right now as an average. So those are the pros that I can see they would enjoy. But like, I can eat junk food feasts like they can. Like, I probably would just rather be me today than a king.
I would just say quickly, and then I do have to go. There's always a statement that, the best things in life are free. And the best things in life are the things you can't pay for. If you look at, what I was just stating about that level of community, where you have known people for hundreds of years, that is not something you can pay for. And nobody today, no matter how much money you have, can ever have that. That is impossible to have no matter what level of money that you have. And with that, I rest my case.
The farm. So, I think if there's anybody going to take up Yasko's side, then we can continue that one. Otherwise, let's find a new topic. Let's find one that gets people arguing. Scotsman, you like a debate sometimes, don't you?
Yeah, I'm like a pig in mud.
Say again?
I'm like a pig in mud. Yeah, I do love arguing.
All right, pick a topic for us. Take the stage.
Sorry, what?
Not you, Sage.
I'm pro a deflationary currency like a crypto or a gold standard, a fixed money supply. I think that's better than inflationary money.
I like that. That's a good topic. So deflationary currency you stand for. Who wants to take him? Go on, Cole. Go on, Tim. Anyone?
I agree with him.
Oh. All right, I'll steelman for the other side in the meantime, because one of the things I've heard is a huge value to an inflationary currency is if you have large amounts of wealth amassed, you're encouraged to put it back into the market, which stimulates growth and opportunity for other people.
Yeah, that is one of the main arguments I hear, but I would argue they all do that every day, all the time. Like, even normal average people that are like less than a millionaire sort of looking to invest, and like billionaires by default pretty much have shares. I mean, you do have a point. Like, if we're in a gold standard, someone would say 500 grand saved up might be more. But then I'd argue, well, they can already put it in gold anyway. They're free to do that, but most people do choose to put it in the stock market. So, like, I would see it as akin if we just had the, like, if money was, say, backed by gold and fixed. Just like today, you can already get gold. Everyone's already putting in the stock market. So I just repeated myself. But the massive pros, I think, of a deflationary currency, the main one, I would say, wages. With inflation, your boss gets to give you an automatic pay cut every year, 2-5%, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And like, it's just invisible. The average person, doesn't have the time to research and dig into economics like this. And if you look at the graph in 1971, when America went off the gold standard, that around that time it looked like when productivity of the society kept going up, but then wages started to decouple from that.
Interesting. Can you fact
what was
check
that
for me,
year?
Cade?
Did you say 1971?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought it was much earlier.
Oh, they went half off the gold. They were like 100% on the gold standard. Then in 1933, they made it like back 60% by gold. Then 1971 completely disconnected.
Oh, okay. I thought it was like Britain. I think we did it in about, I don't know, 1920 or something.
Yeah, Britain was different.
Can you fact check that for me, Sage? That's a good one. It's a very good one. So that means you can give people what feels and looks to them like a pay rise, but all of it is being gobbled up in extra cost. So you're constantly squeezing. It's like a new way to make slaves, because you push people into a rental thing and they can just never coalesce enough capital to get out from under the debt.
Yeah, and when you do get an actual pay rise, it's deceptive because most of that increase is inflation anyway. So that could just be you actually just preserving purchasing power, but you feel good and felt like you got rewarded, but it's a lie.
Yeah, I think you've kind of won me over. It just moved my... Is anybody watching the visit? Just move my notes over to your side, right as I was like, I think you've won this for me. I don't know enough that I now agree, but I know that I don't know enough to disagree. That's fun.
Yeah, and with, say, the money system being tied to deflation, I don't think that's much of an issue in any other markets because, supermarkets and businesses are always constantly adjusting their prices anyway. I don't see how that deflation might accidentally steer them in the wrong direction or whatever. Like, the only argument or the only thing I can think of that's similar to your wages being paid is rent. Would that your rent might accidentally go up occasionally because it's a fixed number and the money's getting more expensive. However, I think in enough of a free market, landlords will be competitive like any other business.
Why are you called Flying Scotsman? Are you relatives hail from Scotland?
Yeah, my grandma and granddad are Scottish, and my granddad flew microlights, so that was his nickname.
Ah, nice. Okay. Yeah, sorry, go on.
I'll go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm sure you've looked into this. You've probably heard of the tally stick, right? What we had for about 800 years or something like that.
Oh, yeah, I have. Yeah, that was clever because they kept 2 bits separate, so it's almost like impossible to counterfeit. But then again, people they weren't like checking every single stick every time it got traded, I assume. So, but yeah.
Yeah, that's a little bit of my shtick when crypto comes up. Because to me, I just think it's inevitable to go to the digital. I don't see any way it could be anything else. And I usually say, we're not going back to the tally stick anytime soon.
Yeah. And I think another advantage of deflation or a fixed money supply that the government can't manipulate is taxes become way more transparent. And if governments can't go into debt and they want to start a pointless war, they're going to have to convince the whole public, hey, we're going to have to raise your income tax to 50% this year. Please support us. Everyone's going to rebel and say no. So that can help cut government waste.
So you could economically make war impossible. So if you were being invaded, it would be, of course, we have to. But if it was, do you want to go, does everybody want to pay, 20, 30, 40 bucks more a week or a month in order that we go hit Iran? Everybody will say, no, thank you. That's an interesting concept.
Yeah, but then there is also a good criticism that if America's on the gold standard, but another country's still printing money, they could have an advantage, can wage war more easier. Their government can outspend easily,
Right.
so that
This
is a
is such-
vulnerability.
This is really good reasoning and well said. And I'm still squaring it with. Are you also interested in QAnon?
Yeah, I'm heavily into that. I've been into economics before QAnon. That's fascinated in history of the gold standard and how money printing works and all that.
Because that could be a next one. If you want to take the hill of QAnon, I'm sure you'll get some takers, and then I won't need to debate, and I can go back to moderating. Because that's a good topic that'll get people fired up if you're up for it.
Yeah.
This one, I think you've won. You've brought all the notes over to your side.
Yeah, so the waging war, that's pretty much the only downside to the thing, advantage of other countries. But to me, the upsides far outweigh with a fixed money supply.
Mm.
And it also, just by default, it will force banks to be more honest. They know they can't get a bailout. If we're on a Bitcoin standard or whatever, no one can print it.
Bitcoin's always confused me when people are like, oh, nobody can trace it and then the money's real because it's recorded in the rest of the chain. I'm like, how can both of those things be true? How can we both not be traceable and recorded everywhere so you know?
It's partially true. So it's pseudonymous. So imagine Discord, if you could just make any username and password and you never had to type your identity. That's what it's like
That's
creating
the
a
thing.
Bitcoin
You'll still
wallet.
be able to de-anonymize that. I'll be able to de-anonymize it just by finding the time somebody logged on or the fingerprint of something or other, for sure. That's
there are companies.
They've already done that too, right? They've found dead wallets and have a good idea who they belong to.
Yeah, they can do that.
Anyway, do you want to do a QAnon one? Do you want to make a bold QAnon claim?
I don't know. Yeah, if people want. Yeah, the problem is it's sort of like, to prove it's true, it requires hours of looking at all these graphics and going each coincidence bit by bit, which by itself they look weak, but together they're strong. But yeah, if anyone. Basically, I believe it's a massive military operation to expose all the corruption in the world. And that.
Do you think the Trump campaign is a military operation to expose, I guess,
Epstein, everything, rigged elections.
Right.
Yeah, and that most conspiracy theories are true, like 9/11 and all that.
Yeah, I think many will agree on 9/11, but I think, somebody want to take him on, I think the QAnon one, ask some questions, get to understand. You don't have to take a position directly against it. I just don't want to be the main interlocutor. I feel I take over. I'm trying to not.
Yeah, I'm not interested in debating the topic, but I will say that when I first saw the QAnon thing, it didn't resonate at all. So I just ignored it. I paid it no mind at all.
And what do you think made it? What do you think was the difference between resonating? Did you sort of wonder to yourself what made it not resonate?
No, it's one of those things where something feels off. And how do I quantify that to you, Eggs? I don't know.
No, I'm with you on that.
Do you believe it could be real, but they're evil, and it's like an Operation Trust? Or...
Yeah, I'd say it's more of a misleading thing.
Yeah, fair enough. Do you believe in any other conspiracies?
Oh, yeah, sure. I mean, I've been down all the conspiracy rabbit holes, to be honest. There's something very fishy going on about 9/11. We've talked about that ad nauseum. We don't need to keep carrying on about that. But yeah, there's lots of things. I mean, just look at history. Look at the pyramids. Look at the megalithic structures. That could be a conspiracy in itself. How the fuck did they make them? I don't know. I mean, I suppose it's possible if you throw enough slavery at it.
I do believe we've had past civilizations like ours that the elites have chosen to wipe out or whatever to stop us getting too advanced and figuring out how to have a freer society without their control.
Yeah, I it's fun to speculate, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah, it does feel really weird that we just happen to be alive at this point in time where, it's like the whole hockey stick, like 400 years ago, people were still out hunting and stuff for, we had basic societies, and now, with all the technology and everything, like it's insane to think what the world will be like 200 years from now.
Oh yeah, the JFK thing, that was probably the first one, wasn't it? That was the big conspiracy that probably drug me into conspiracy theories in general.
Yeah, there's a classic.
There's a very old documentary called A Rich Man's Trick, which was about JFK mostly. And I guess that was about 2000-ish, somewhere around there. And yeah, I don't know if anybody's seen that. I watched it quite recently, and I disagreed with a lot of things that were said in it.
Yeah.
But at the time, I was like, "Oh shit!"
Yeah, if you want some Q evidence, JFK's grave looks like a giant Q.
Yeah, have you heard the idea that he was a gay fella?
No, I haven't heard that.
I think Owen Benjamin talked about that. He was actually a gay fella, and what was the other thing? Well, you probably heard the one where his driver turned around and killed him, or somebody in the front seat or something. And then there's another one where, that policeman who died, who looked just like him. Basically, he's the corpse that they fucked around with, and he didn't actually die at all. So there's so much shit around it. But they do say that's where the term conspiracy came from, right?
Yeah, it is actually really bizarre that JFK lookalike, that was he a cop, JP Tippins or whatever. What was he officially murdered by Oswald? I forgot.
I don't think so.
And he just happens to die within like half an hour or whatever. That is really weird.
Yeah, I don't trust any of it. I really don't. My thing is this flat earth thing. I don't trust anybody on either side. Like, it could well be a psychological operation with these people all together. Not the useful idiots, but I'm just saying, generally speaking, I don't trust in people. I trust in God. I think it's a really silly thing to trust in people unless they earn it, of course.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I never rule out that possibility that Q is just the elites. It's all theatre. They're all on the same side. If that's the case, we're definitely screwed. They're going to do like, they have the perfect recipe for a new world order where it's, Trump then plays the role of the good guy that all you guys who hate him will be like, holy crap, look how good he is. He's just made the world a utopia, exposed all the evil. If they're on the bad side, then they've definitely won. You got Elon Musk promoting his Neuralink microchip. Now imagine if that legitimately does cure loads of mental diseases. Everyone will be praising it, and then like a chip in your head is like the perfect money. No one's gonna be hard to steal.
Is it postulated to cure diseases?
Currently, it's helping people with ALS, able to speak and stuff, and guys that are quadriplegics can now use a computer and like move a mouse with their mind and that.
Isn't there? I don't even. He might be ranked, but there's a guy who plays COD with his Neuralink.
Oh wow, yeah.
But that's, that's not the same as curing disease. That's alleviating neurological issues is one thing, but curing diseases is too broad a brush to paint on these things.
Yeah, sorry, I just meant mental condition, diseases, and all that.
But if someone's able to move a cursor around on a screen or make Boolean yes/no gestures to a computer with a neural link, in the same way as you can put one of those in the 70s, you could put a cap on with loads of sensors and achieve the same result. I mean, isn't that useful? Isn't that a purposeful thing to pursue technologically?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like any tool that can be used for good and evil. But I'm just saying, like, if they go down that route of pretending to be good, it will definitely be convincing and used for a lot of legitimate good.
Yeah, I agree with that. If there's a way to use something, whoever makes money is not interested in the good part of it, are they? Oh God,
kind of.
Please don't tell me people will be thinking using algorithms one day. We truly are screwed then.
Oh yeah, imagine AI answers tapped straight into your head.
Yeah, they could print into your vision, right?
Sure, but imagine if your consciousness was inherently plumbed in to a annealing algorithm. So whatever slant your mind was taking, it took it there.
You could do the number of men that would be walking down the street watching porn, or being able to sit in a meeting and like be searching the other guy's Instagram.
Above and beyond that, look at the way people tunnel down through stuff on the internet. Imagine if your subconscious was doing that.
Oh God, I see what you mean.
We'd be screwed. Yeah. We'd be screwed. You don't need Skynet. You just need a bunch of people dribbling and convulsing themselves into vegetatively useless people by virtue of their own subconscious plumbed into the internet.
That is true. It'd just be like on a dopamine drip feed.
Oh, it would, wouldn't it? You'd literally be in your those guys in the suits the wingsuits who just literally navigate navigate valleys. Yeah, you'd be doing that in your own head. You'd be just literally taking your own journey on your own with your own risks, floating through a scenery of your own making. No one would agree on anything ever again.
Yeah, you could be living in virtually non-intersecting realities while sitting next to somebody on a bus.
Yep. The Matrix.
You wouldn't even need to be on a bus with them. Like there'll soon be self-driving capsules. So the chance you would need to lock eyes with another human being.
Yep.
Throughout your day, where it used to be 400, 4,000. Now it's like 4 if you really have to via a screen.
Yep. We take all the unpleasant aftertastes of films like Brazil and The Matrix and all those, and we just build them as one convulsively, repulsively antagonistic notion of the world where none of our jobs are real, none of our perspectives are real, none of our abilities to construct societal constructs anymore live outside of the algorithms which cajole us into our working mindset. How horrific is that? Sleep tight, everyone.
It is terrifying because I know people who like devoted their life to World of Warcraft, for example, like just sort of went, actually online life is enough for me. And I don't know if you ever played World of Warcraft, but it was janky as fuck. Yeah. It was shit. And people would, to them to be a level 50 paladin was like so cool. Why would you not?
Right.
And yeah, what you're saying is like now you could be doing it and you could still be walking around in reality. But just like I was wondering this, what about if you demanded to be seen a certain way by other people? So you said, I actually want you to see me as a petite blonde, please. I want you to change how my voice sounds to your ears. I want you to believe that I'm an 18-year-old blonde, please.
Oh. The ultimate cat. When the whole of your perceptron is you invoking a catfish that no one can punch through.
Yeah,
I don't think you have to ask. We're all going to do that.
I saw an article today on
Rated.
all places on the BBC about. You ever heard of EVE Online?
Yep.
Okay,
Space
and
game.
yeah, it's a gigantic. Not just a game. It's been accused of being some like horrifically dystopian commerce market where inside that world frame there is like pan-galactic agencies and forces and coalitions and people that own planets and own like Elon Musk-esque like constructs of wealth and power that just transcend beyond continents but work into a galaxy. Okay, right? People on EVE Online earn 9-figure, 6-7-figure sums of money off of it, because they just literally just. And they were talking to one guy who was just some 23, 24-year-old who's literally just spends all his time on there, and he's in that world. He's a lieutenant general in some coalition. That was literally this huge, great power structure inside and monetary power structure inside this game that 3 weeks ago fell apart, and within 48 hours, £400,000 worth of people's money disappeared in the game.
Oh, what?
In this great pan-galactic simulated.
You've cut out for me.
It's because they're in EVE Online. They have an actual like how would you say it? It's like a
economy kind of
an actual economy, yeah. And it's like if you're part of a big huge alliance that has a huge economy and has all this money, and you've got all this money invested in it and everything and all this stuff, and then something happens and somehow either somebody causes it to collapse from the inside or somebody is able to attack you with, say, 2 or 3 other alliances all gang up and take down one huge one. Then when it all collapses, everything that you've got and spent and built and everything, like everything you have running, if you have, because people will make real money off of that. They will literally go and set up mining chains to where they mine from certain planets, build ships, and then they sell those ships for real money to other people. They'll have like entire planets that do nothing but build these crazy ships or build weapons or build whatever, and they sell it for actual real money.
Love it.
And
they're in a factory. They're in a factory making fake spacecraft. That's wild.
Yeah.
See, that'll be an AI
but
job
once it collapses, if you're part of an alliance that collapses, there's a lot of money that disappears. So yeah, that's crazy.
Mm-hmm. So how did it collapse? What was the thing that made it fall?
I don't know. I don't even know if that's what happened or not. I'm just saying that I know that that's how it works.
Yeah, I think they had massive wars and stuff. And the games even had stock market collapses.
Yeah, that is fun. Just how. And that's the thing, how much more of our life will become leisure and online stuff. The more the machines.
It's so crazy. I played a game called Horizon Zero Dawn a couple years ago, and then they come out with a part 2. But it took place in like the year 2070, and when I first played it, it came out. The first one came out like 2018 or something. It was like 2 years before AI hit the scene. And I thought, they should have made it like 2280 instead of 2080. Give it, a couple hundred years in the future, because what's supposed to have happened is the technology become like really advanced, and then people started, instead of fighting wars with humans, they started building robots to fight wars. And these robots, had basically AI in them that controlled them and stuff, but they were also controlled by whatever country built them. and then one guy decided that he would secretly, he was like a trillionaire, just like Elon Musk. Just in the game, he's just like Elon Musk. And they didn't base him off of Elon Musk. It's just funny how all this played out.
Yeah.
And he decided that he would build these new robots that would, they could repair themselves and constantly keep themselves going and stuff using the life of the planet. So like animals and trees, wherever it could find the things it needed, it could take that, like, whatever, and convert it into what it needed to repair itself. So if it needed carbon or if it needed whatever. So once he built it, it ended up something happened, and it, like the whole story always goes, something happens, and then it got, loose on its own, and it got out of control, and it ended up killing the planet. And the last thing that they decided to do was build a secret underground vault and set it up to where in like they set it up to where they would have a computer running constantly trying to break into the mainframe of that robot that guy built, which was a massive, big old machine. And once it broke into it and stopped it, by that point the world would have been ended. All people and everything was dead because it was consuming whatever. So once it got it ended, then it would then kick off and say, okay, now that that's ended, we'll start trying to repair the planet with new robots. And then after so long, if the planet looked viable, they had a bunch of human eggs and sperm set up to where they would hatch and be raised by other robots. It's just this whole storyline.
I would still want humans to exist. Yeah, I think that would be it. You would still want humans to exist, just not let them wipe you out.
Yeah, and the way it's working out though now is like with this new AI craze and everything, it's like it's so plausible now, where before it wasn't. You just have to know the story and stuff, but it's like the world is literally following what the storyline of that game. I think it's funny.
Yeah.
That was a good game. That was a really, really good game. Really good story.
How old is it? Horizon Zero Dawn.
It's like
I can just find it out.
8 years old at this point. Hold on, man. I found a trailer to post it.
Oh, yes. This is the one that I had a debate with my friend. One of the last conversations I had with my mate is he was like, oh, look at how they made her so androgynous. And I was like, what? So I've never played this game.
I didn't think so. I thought she looked pretty sexy.
Exactly. But he said, well, but they frumped her up. So they did a pre-release. And then when that came out for release, they'd frumped her up a little bit. And I loved it because he was like, oh, the last one, she's wearing a bikini. I was like, but she's a wasteland wandering apocalypse girl. She's going to have leather across her thighs. She's not going to slash open a femoral artery every time she's got to jump over a corrugated iron or barbed wire fence.
Yeah.
Like she's got to wear all of her clothes for the cold times and the warm times. Which fucking person wanders around in a bikini? She's wearing these cool boots.
2016 is when it came out. Let me post this trailer and you can check it out. It's worth a watch. Yeah, the new one is called Horizon Forbidden West. But basically, there's like robotic dinosaurs and stuff that's walking around because when the robots rebuilt the world, they, for whatever reason that's in the story, they rebuilt a lot of it, like a cross between robotics and real life animals that it knew about. So you have a lot of like robotic stuff walking around. But it's all based on a lot of Native American type stuff. Like a lot of the stuff in the game is, you can tell, it's clearly taken from Native American type stuff because it's supposed to be people are living in a world that's already been destroyed and then rebuilt, and then they've been turned loose in it again. And What chat are we using right now in here, by the way?
Chat mostly.
Do what?
Side chat.
The side chat. What are you calling this side? The show chat up here? Is that
The
what everybody's using?
Coliseum. So we're in the Coliseum. The the chat that's in channel chat for that.
Okay, I got you. Just sit there. There you go.
Yeah,
See if you
Omni,
do you see that? Is that in the right chat? It's the
that's
show chat.
Yeah, that's in the right chat.
Okay, so let's get a debate going. I want to try and see if we can get something going. We're having too nicer chats because we end up agreeing on stuff.
I agree.
With that topic you have on screen, is Flat Earth a psyop? I believe I have some really good evidence that it's a psyop. So, have you heard the claim that in that PBS Stephen Hawking documentary that they used fake CGI on the helicopter to show it going below the horizon? Have you heard that?
I have. I've proven it's true. I did a frame-by-frame analysis and have it somewhere on my computer maybe. I want somebody else to take this debate. I nominate Colin Omni versus Flying Scotsman and whoever else you want to tag in with you.
So I don't think it's a psyop. So would that be okay? So if that's the proper.
Let me just start a whole new board, and then you're both going to have opening statements. New board, bingo bango. Just a second. It's going to take a second.
Well, the whole reason I was thinking about that game real quick, X, before you, while you're doing what you're doing there, is simply because in that game they have these little earpieces that they wear on their ears, and but does basically what everybody would love to have, like Apple glasses or something do, to where when you look at something it automatically scans it and tells you what it is, or when you look at a face it knows who they are. And that's like a thing in the game that it all works off of a central mainframe type thing.
Yeah, an augmented vision. That's absolutely what I'm thinking. That's going to be my next project, to build that with some glasses. Awesome. All right, but we are throwing over to Scotsman. You do your opening statement about what you were saying before. Lay it out for Sage.
Okay, so my main claim is
The conversation
that
has shifted.
PBS
I'm
Stephen
listening.
Hawking documentary. Now, it wasn't specifically a flat Earth documentary or anything. It was just saying, okay, how do we know we're on a globe? And they do these two experiments. One of them, they have a laser on the water aiming at a boat. Then they take the boat further away, and that laser aims up higher on the boat. And the second one, they use a big telescope and a camera and film a helicopter going below the horizon, while the people in the helicopter see they're still 20 foot above the ground. However, then when you look at the footage, you can see clearly they've like added the helicopter into one of the scenes or done some kind of CGI fakery. And my claim is they did that on purpose as perfect ammunition for flat earthers to say, hey, look, they're clearly faking this. What are they hiding? Look at this perfect evidence for flat earth. So I believe it was bait.
Yeah, and so your point is not about demonstrating Earth's curvature, but that it's a psyop that they got caught on purpose. That's your main point, isn't it?
Yeah, simply because I believe, all it does is prove their lies, not that the Earth isn't a globe, because of all the other evidence for the globe.
Fantastic.
So the question is, why did they do it?
Omni, over to you.
Okay. Those videos were not made by they were made by video production groups, and they were, bought by or allowed to play by PBS and Nat Geo or whichever. So in this case, we're talking about individual people who, set up a test and then essentially bullocked it and then saved it or tried to save it in post-production. So I don't think I don't think that there's strong evidence for a conspiracy behind this. I do think that it's, a bullocked test that, they should be ashamed of, but that's I don't see a reason. I don't see the evidence necessary to ascribe a psychological operation to that. Also, the idea that this is done to trap flat earthers, and then what? It convinces the flat earthers they're right, but then what happens? What's the next step?
It's just more throws, more whatever on the fire. To them, it's like this is undeniable proof that they're needing to fake stuff. Therefore, they have to fake it because the Earth is flat. That's what flat earthers think.
That's what flat earthers think.
Reaffirm.
But then, what's the purpose of the conspiracy faking that?
Okay, yeah. So I believe flat Earth is a psyop to poison the well of other more credible conspiracy theories. Oh, what, you think they put bombs in the Twin Towers? Oh, you must be an idiot, flat Earther. I'm not going to look into it anymore. That kind of thing.
Okay, so you're aware that on our fellow Discord, Earth Awakens, the predominant theory is that there were not even airplanes involved in 9/11.
Yeah, and I agree that's very silly, and that may just be grassroots, just people being idiots. I don't believe there. Or actually, no. I'm going to change my mind on that, because in the footage, so firstly, yeah, I do believe they're real airplanes and all that. In the footage, the one where it looks like the nose of the plane is coming out of the building, and to me that looks too weird, almost like they may have done that on purpose, again to poison what to trick people into thinking the planes were CGI. But I'm only like 50% sure on that. The other part of me says, okay, maybe part of the nose retained its shape as it broke through. So
Okay.
maybe it was legit, but yeah.
Okay, so once again, in this case, you're saying, well, I think 9/11 could have been a inside job, or was an inside job. I don't know where you stand, but I think that the conspiracy poisoned the well by putting some stuff in there that's so dumb that it'll just make everybody think that the whole conspiracy theory edifice is stupid. And so, first off, that's not true, and if that's their attempt, it hasn't worked. So we have actual polling. One of my project that I'm working on deals with polling about what constituencies in normies believe which conspiracy theories. And 9/11 Inside Job is one of them that's polled, and I don't remember the numbers, but a good number of people believe it was an inside job of some sort. So, whatever they're trying to do, the idea that there were no planes or that the planes were CGI, that's nowhere. That's a small number of lunatics who believe that. So I'm from the public perspective, right? I'm not specifically calling somebody a lunatic, but my point is that this is not a popular theory. It's not gaining traction. As far as I can tell, it's not really poisoning any wells. It's just.
But the problem is, even if it's only a tiny amount of conspiracy theories, you do occasionally see it on the forums. It does make its way, even if it's a tiny amount. I mean, the fact that we're discussing that now shows that it's known.
Well, so from my perspective, people just conspiracy theorists will periodically come up with something that's so bizarre. So in the case of the videos, they're actually onto something. Those videos were fake evidence of the globe. In the case of 9/11 had no airplanes, it's so bizarre that it's discounting the visual evidence of thousands of people on the street who reported seeing this. And
keep finish.
Right.
Sorry.
Well, anyway, so
I'd say that's a perfect comparison. Just like we have ample evidence that the planes were real, there's also ample evidence that the globe is real, even though the PBS, that documentary, did fakery.
Right. I agree. So I don't. But what I don't see is, first off, I don't see the value in an invisible hand trying to create this to discredit other conspiracy theorists, because to a certain extent, the credibility of a conspiracy theorist has very little to do with the value of the theory. So one of the most believed conspiracy theories is anti-vax theories. And that's probably going to offend somebody who thinks it's totally not a conspiracy theory, but it's in that category, and it's well believed by a lot of people. So the flat Earth stuff isn't doing anything about that. It's not; those are just entirely different realms. I don't see the value of it, and I don't see the evidence that I can see you conjecturing that it's the case.
Okay, yeah, I agree. Anti-vax could be kind of separate because there could be plenty of people talking about medical stuff being anti-vax, and not care about any other conspiracy rabbit holes and not look down them. But I say for anyone that looks down any other conspiracy rabbit hole like 9/11, they'll eventually come across flat Earth and they'll be like, "Oh, this stuff is crap. I'm going to stop caring."
So I think in order for us to believe it's a psyop, we would need more than just I can come up with a rationale why somebody might be psyoping this. I do agree that there's malfeasance in those videos, but I think it's more easily explained by somebody back in mission control looks at the video and says, well, this didn't, you didn't get the shot, fake it, and somebody fakes it. But not we need to fake the Earth being a globe, so fake it. If they wanted to fake the Earth being a globe, there would be easier ways to do it than trying to CGI a helicopter.
No, but that's the purpose of psyop. They did it on purpose so that people spot it.
Yeah, but outside of very niche communities, nobody knows.
Yeah, I agree. I've never seen anything comparable to that, like any other smoking gun evidence. I think is a psyop.
Okay, so I think we can wrap this. Eggshells.
With that Stephen Hawking document, did those independent people make it in collaboration with Stephen Hawking, or was that just footage brought in by them as part of the larger Stephen Hawking thing?
Stephen Hawking put his name on it, or his whatever media person put the name on it. But Stephen Hawking, I assure you, had nothing. Was he wasn't out there in the wheelchair, zooming around to make sure the filming worked properly. I don't know if he even met with any of the people. I would be a bit surprised.
He did narrate it. It seemed to be.
Well, honestly, I would be shocked if Stephen Hawking knew or cared.
I mean, he is on film in other parts of the overall documentary, but obviously not meeting with those individual things. It's like a 3 or 4 part series, or something.
Yeah, but I don't think that Stephen Hawking devoted a lot of attention to that. I think they went there, they filmed it with them, he agreed to film it with them, they left, they did a bunch of stuff. I doubt he ever watched the show. I mean,
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, and I'm not saying he had anything to do with
right.
But I've never heard the claim before that it was they just bought the footage. So fair enough, I'll look into that.
Once more.
I mean, they may have shot it. They may have shot it for the film, but I mean, if he's like, I want to make this thing about, if someone tells, a scientist, we're going to make a science film to reach people. I was like, yeah, okay. We'd like to put your name on it. You're a famous scientist. Okay. We want to ask you, 30 minutes of questions. Okay. And then he does it, and that's the last he ever thinks about it. So that would be my guess. I don't know. Now, maybe there's more to it, but I haven't seen that. So, I don't know. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know where to take this, Eggs. I think it's a good conversation. I don't think it was much of a combative debate.
Yeah, no, I think it's good because I think it's an interesting question. My answer ends up being for it's somewhere closer to Scotsman's, which is not that there's an organized conspiracy to promote flat Earth, but the crucial bit about that PBS documentary is that there are 3 birds flying across, and
clearly fake.
There's minutes of footage. So he's got minutes of footage for which all he's got to do is choose not a bit that is clearly distinguishable from another bit. That, like any other bit, you could make pixel perfect, but just don't show two of the same bits in the final thing. But definitely don't show the 0.3 of a second when 3 birds fly across the screen.
Yep.
And I think that it was an editor sitting there who got kind of annoyed that he was being asked to lie about their results, because I've been asked to do about that before as an editor, and it makes me feel dirty. And all editing is lying. And so he's decided to show his hand a bit.
Interesting. So do you think they just legitimately screwed up the footage and we got to fake it, otherwise we lose the whole episode? Or
they didn't get it. They had, I think what they did was either weren't filming at the time, I've had that happen, or it's out of focus, or it's this or it's that, or it's just Dan was there, Dan the Waterman, I'll try and get him in here, was there, and he said the issue was they did it twice at different points in the day. So very early on, they couldn't see the chopper, and they get this shot from the chopper this way, going like, oh, wow, we can't see one another. And then had to shoot it again. So they went over there with the same chopper, tried to do the same thing, but the chopper, because of now of refraction, could be seen pretty much the whole time. And
interesting.
So when they went to get, I think that's Dan's story.
Could be. I mean, so either way, to me, it just seems like a fuck up where they somewhat unethically or very unethically papered it over with a CGI chopper or whatever, and
agreed.
Maybe it was sabotaged by the editor or the CGI guy or whatever. But I don't even, I would just say shoddy workmanship rather. That would be my, go-to.
Yeah.
So
I think you would probably agree with me that we would have to accept that if there were other scales of corrupt conspiracy in the world, this Scotsman's assessment of it is probably pretty clever, probably pretty accurate.
Okay, I mean,
we hold that position because we hold to no grand conspiracies.
Well, so in order for there to be a grand conspiracy, in order to entertain a grand conspiracy, I would want to see evidence of the grand part of it. And, there's not, as far as I know, there's no evidence of the grand part of it. So, maybe there's a coordinated effort behind them, but don't know, why would we think that?
Yeah, say with like 9/11, like if I was the evil elite, go, okay, I want to start this war, so I'm going to do a false flag. I would be thinking, no matter how perfectly I pull it off, there will always be a part of the population that's questioning, because you can never hide the rewards and the results of the elite. You got the Patriot Act, they made billions from war contracts. Like you can't hide the motive.
I would go further than that. I would say that unless the plan is to actually have suicide pilots fly planes into the towers, you can't fake it. That would be my position. That the amount of people necessary to fake 9/11 would be harder than having suicide pilots just do it and they're on somebody else's payroll or whatever.
Trick that, and they could even be actual terrorists, right? You could have just had the CIA.
Right.
Sneakily fund some terrorists, right? It's.
I mean, sure. Yeah. You don't have to have the towers, as you pointed out. You don't really have to have the towers fall like that. Just have the planes fucking crash into them. Bob's your uncle. You did it. So, I think, as far as I'm concerned, the risk analysis of trying to build, trying to wire them for demolition, and we have to blow up Building 7. And, we just got lucky that the piece of the tower crashed into Building 7 and set it on fire, but because we already had, we already wired it up. So that was just gratis. That whole saga doesn't make sense to me from a risk analysis standpoint. Just fly the freaking planes into it. Why do you care about Building 7?
Well, that's why I say all the time that a lot seems like a lot of times that flat earthers won't just stop at the what's plausible. Like I say, you know,
I
to
care
me, I
about building
think
sage.
I think that 9/11 was definitely an inside job. I think George W.
What
Bush
are we
damn
really
well
saying?
knew about it, and I think he either allowed it to happen or he helped, you know, make it happen because he wanted to get it back to the Middle East so bad that I feel like that he would have done whatever it took to get back there, and I think that he did just that in order to get back there. But conspiracy theorists won't just stop at that where it's plausible. They want to continue going with, you know, oh, they wired the buildings with bombs and there was no planes, and like get plumb out into woo woo land. And that I never understood that. I never understand why so many conspiracy theorists, when you can have a perfectly plausible conspiracy that actually makes sense, but they'll just blow by with what makes sense and go way out into what completely don't make sense, and then believe that.
So you said it was conspiracy, Cole. Is that what you believe?
Yeah, I think that George W. Bush damn well knew that it was going to happen. I think that he helped it happen.
So you've got this sort of mild position that they had former knowledge of it, but they just let it happen.
Yeah, I think that they may have even helped set it up, because George W. Bush made the statement when he was running for president that he would finish what his dad started with Saddam Hussein, because Saddam Hussein threatened to kill his dad before he was dead. He said, "I will kill the George." Whatever his name is, middle initial was.
Yeah, so that doesn't.
But anyway,
doesn't actually make sense, unfortunately.
But anyway, he completely said that he would definitely finish what his dad started. He's an oil tycoon. He desperately wanted back to the Middle East so bad enough that they actually lied about weapons of mass destruction and everything else, just to get back there. And there's a lot more things too. I mean, I could go on and on and on about it, but it just seems to me that he really wanted to get back there.
Please, can I ask you? I'm begging to ask you a question.
Let him finish though next time.
What did 9/11 have to do with Iraq?
What did it have to do with Iraq?
Yep.
It didn't really have to do anything with Iraq. It was just, it got them to the Middle East.
Okay, so my plan is to invade Iraq. So I concoct a scheme to fly planes from Afghanistan, run by a Saudi Arabian guy, into the World Trade Centers, so that after starting a war in Afghanistan, I can then, a few years later, start a war in Iraq. Does that sound like a reasonable plan to you?
What sounds like a reasonable plan to me is, what sounds like a reasonable plan to me is someone who wanted back to the Middle East, and that was the best way they could do it.
What if you were going to, do a false flag where Iraq attacked us, blowing up a ship, say, or blowing up a subway in the name of the Iraqi government? Doesn't it occur to you that if you don't really care about invading Afghanistan, which we don't really care about, they don't have a resource we want. Doesn't it occur to you that you could actually, and you wouldn't have to wait 3 years, right?
Oh, but Iraq wasn't the one that we was having trouble out of. We was having issues with people in Afghanistan and the whole terrorist thing. So they used that as a setup to start a war, because that's the people that was giving us trouble in the Middle East. So we used them as a means, because nobody would have believed that just out of the blue Iraq decided to attack America, but they would believe some crazy terrorists, the key word terrorists there, from
Okay. I mean,
some other country caused
yeah,
it.
okay. I think that that's nuts, but if you believe that that plan makes sense to you, I don't know how to convince you otherwise, other than that it just doesn't make any sense.
Don't you think they were like conflating them at the time? I remember where like I thought there was an example of Bush saying something about it, and this reporter coming back to him and going, "That was Afghanistan." He's like, "Oh, they cheered as well," or something like that. Like there was, I think I can see the case that once you've been attacked by Afghanistan or any of these places, you could have just picked any Muslim country on the map, and people would have been like, "Yeah, all right, go get them too."
Well, then why go into Afghanistan?
Because you got to play the part.
It could be playing the part. It could be opium. It could be battery tech. It could just be a staging post to, have I don't know. Could be anything.
No, I mean, none of those work. None of those actually work. If you want to go finish the job in Iraq, then you stage the chemical weapons in Iraq. You don't need Afghanistan.
Afghanistan was the ones that we was dealing with. They're the ones that was doing the terrorist attacks. They was the best ones to convince the populace
that
they did it. You would not convince the populace that Iraq just out of the blue decided to attack. And it had to be something spectacular in order to get Congress to sign off on war. It had to be something like crazy, like bombing the Twin Towers. I mean, it had to be something just really freaking spectacular out there.
I mean,
since
I'll
you
wait.
already had terrorists.
Let me know when you're done.
Okay, I will. When I stop talking, it's when I'm done. Since we already had terrorists that were coming out of like Afghanistan and places like that, not Iraq, they used that country to kick it off. Because that's what sold.
Call. Yield.
All right. So we invaded Iraq because we asserted that Iraq, and plus a bunch of other groups did, like MI5 and stuff, asserted that Iraq was developing weapons of mass destruction. We could have said if we were going to just wildly lie about it, we could have said they were developing smallpox bioweapon. That would have certainly scared people. We could have unleashed a little smallpox bioweapon in the US. That would have been, horrific. And then, we would have invaded Iraq. There's no need to play or to roll the dice with shattering your economy by blowing up the two largest towers in New York. That just, I mean, and if you assert that, well, the problem is we were having trouble with the terrorists. First off, nobody knew who the fuck Al Qaeda was. Nobody was like, oh, I expect an attack from the Al Qaeda in Afghanistan, but I would never believe Saddam Hussein would attack us. That's I mean, you're just making that up. Nobody knew who the fuck Osama bin Laden was until 9/11.
That's right.
I'm talking about the common, people. So no, that I mean, it's just completely missing, all of the relevant motive factors that would, come from trying to stage an attack from the wrong country. You're asserting that, well, that was going to happen anyway. Those people were going to attack the towers anyway. And so then I allow it to happen because I know I can, 3 years in, use it as an excuse to attack Iraq, which makes no sense.
It's not missing any of the motives whatsoever. You had one of the biggest oil tycoons on the planet, one of the biggest oil tycoon families on the planet. People like that, Bush didn't care if it hurt the economy or not. He knows the economy will bounce back. But what he did care about was the sheer amount of ungodly amounts of money that they made off of that war because they're oil tycoons. And guess who uses the most oil and guess when they use it? It's the United States during wartime. All right. Guess who made billions and billions off of all that? His family. I mean, he had the best motive that you could ever have if you're rich and greedy.
So Bush's oil tycoon stuff is not relevant to this. It becomes a completely different argument. The argument shifts from he wanted to finish the job because of his dad to now it's about oil and resources.
No, that
which
was just one of the
Afghanistan,
things
as I
that
pointed out,
goes
has
along
none
with
of.
it.
Afghanistan doesn't have any of those resources. So if 9/11 was really about oil, then you would have claimed they were attacking from some oil-rich nation, which Saudi Arabia happens to be, but we certainly
You're not
didn't
going to
make much of
attack
that.
Saudi Arabia.
And
Saudi
rightfully
Arabia
so,
at that
but,
time was selling
if you
America
wanted to
most
go
of
with
its
that,
oil.
that should be your go-to.
Saudi
So,
Arabia.
yeah, no, I don't think this holds up. And diverting about what kind of oil man Bush is just seems like obfuscation. It doesn't address the idea that you would allow a devastating attack from country A so that in addition to attacking country A, sometime in the future you can attack country B. That does not seem to make sense from any kind of operational plan analysis that you could you could pitch to me.
There's a lot of things don't make sense, Omni. It don't make sense for the companies that build basically all the military weapons and stuff in America to literally basically keep us in war all the time. The people that sits on the boards pay big money to Congress to get things done, and they keep us in war constantly because war pays dividends. That's the whole idea of the what's it called? The industrial military complex. That's the whole idea of it. If you sit on the board and you make billions of dollars off of military contracts, and those military contracts go away when you're not at war, and you don't really give a shit about being at war, it don't bother you too for your country to be at war because you're making a lot of money if you're that kind of people, and a lot of those people are that kind of people. They keep us in war because it keeps money rolling in. That don't make sense to me to do that, but people do that. People just like George W. Bush, who was set to make a stupid amount of money off of ending up back in Iraq. I didn't say that he went back to Iraq just to avenge his dad. I just said that was one of the things that he said. One of the main reasons that he wanted to get back there is because of the sheer amount of money that they made off of it.
So now we've gone from Bush wanted to finish the job to Bush was an oil man to the military industrial complex wants to keep us always in war. That's just a smorgasbord of left-wing talking points.
No, it's not left-wing.
I don't buy it.
But rich people will do a lot of really bad stuff.
Yeah,
to keep the money coming in.
History taught us anything. It's that, right, Andy? Rich people do fucking evil things.
History teaches us a lot, but I'm not sure that Cole has learned the lessons of history here. I honestly actually don't think so. I think that history has taught us that big lies get caught and that the kind of risk analysis geopolitics that nations engage in would never touch something like the kind of 9/11 theory that he's proposing. We've seen moves to interwar for ideological reasons, like in Vietnam. We've seen moves to interwar for purposes of like absolute resource capture, which is not what happened in Afghanistan or Iraq. We didn't kick their ass and take their gas. If anything, that's what happened in Venezuela, but that's not what happened in Iraq. We didn't have our gas prices plunge because we took over Iraq. We just paid a fortune in blood and treasure. So no, rich people doing bad things, absolutely. Rich people doing bad things that get us into wars for which there is no clear value, not so. And you can you can see like Halliburton. Yeah, obviously somebody profiteers on war, but no, that's not the lesson. History doesn't teach us that the people who profiteered on war are the people who started the war.
Cheney
It would
was the
be.
vice president. He was a former like CEO or something, or on the board of Halliburton.
Yeah. I mean, if we want to just erase the slate, roll back everything that's been said, and be like, Bush did 9/11 for Halliburton, you realize that's like a big change.
Well, it's both Bush and Cheney both benefiting.
Yeah,
Yeah, but
Cheney
it's still,
benefited big time
that's like
too.
a whole different argument.
Well, it wouldn't just be those two, right? The accusation, I think, I would extend out to now where we see Nancy Pelosi and many of these people consistently beating the markets and hours after meetings investing in things, and then say, okay, if that's happening at such a scale that people on publicly listed stocks, which I think would all agree you could get around it, right? A publicly listed stock would be so easy to like just have a shell company, a trust and a this and a that and in your daughter's name or whatever else.
Okay.
The question would be, could they have enough money to just get it all done themselves?
I want to call a timeout. I'm making the T symbol with my hands. Timeout. Are we now going to 9/11 was about insider trading? Is that what we've pivoted to?
I thought what we were trying to settle was foreknowledge versus LIHOP versus MIHOP. Could a LIHOP win? Is that not kind of what we were at?
Well, that's what I was. Okay, so I agree that that's a much saner discussion than airplanes or no airplanes. However, LHOP versus MHOP is, the question is, what's the evidence for both? So for LHOP, you would have to show that the disparate fragments of intelligence somehow had coalesced to the point where he knew about it and let it happen on purpose, which is honestly insane. But we could discuss the risk analysis.
It's insane to you, Omni, like it's insane to me too.
But
it ain't insane to everybody.
You have to show that the evidence coalesced to give him that picture from MHOP. So show that.
Oh, it is insane to everybody.
So
People
there's not actually evidence for MHOP. It's a much more viable theory, but the evidence for it isn't there, and you won't be able to show it because we know we already looked. That's why we created OD&I and why we did the intelligence sharing stuff in the Patriot Act, because it did not coalesce for that. So MHOP has a heavy, heavy lift that nobody's prepared to do, or rather LHOP does. MHOP is an even heavier lift that you would have to show. MHOP has made it happen on purpose. LHOP has let it happen on purpose. So sorry, I got it backwards. LHOP, you have to show the intel chain, which nobody can do.
The intel chain could be. I agree with you. I don't think there's evidence for it. I think the argument against it, and I'm not an LHOPper, but I think the argument against it is that a LIHOP could be 3 or 4 people. You could just have 3 or 4 people who can just like underfund the NSA and, scuttle that program, put that incompetent person in charge of that thing. And only 4 or 5 people would actually know, and everybody else could see it being real. And their entire job would be to never get caught doing that, to never have evidence of that come out.
You'd still have to show evidence for that, so because of the walls between intelligence sharing, you actually don't have to show that. You don't have to put an incompetent person in there or underfund anybody. Those walls already existed. The walls between intelligence sharing of agencies. There was enough information out there to have possibly put together the nature of the plan, but it was in different silos with different agencies. Nobody connected all the pieces.
Mm-hmm.
So we know we have the fingerprints necessary to show LHOP, and they do not show it. So for MHOP, you have an insanely heavy lift, depending on what your scenario is for making it happen.
Yeah, my hop's I think very difficult. I call it my hop.
Yeah.
I don't think it's that far of a stretch myself. I think if you're
My
a
hop or
very
lie hop?
powerful person, it's either
Made it
one.
happen or let it happen.
Either one.
Yeah. Well, if you
Yeah.
don't care, then you don't have a position. Then yeah, I can have a general feeling that Bush bad, but that is like the left wing talking point of of the lefties. And although I would actually be impressed, Cole, if you were doing that, I know you're not.
No, I don't look at it as right or left. I look at
I
it
know
as
you
just
don't.
looking at it. I
I
look
know
at
you
it as
don't.
just looking at it as Bush. It was just. I
Right.
just think that he did. I just think that he knew damn well it was going to happen, and they let it happen because it either they let it happen or they made it happen, one or the other. But whatever. It got them back to the Middle East. They
To
needed
what
to get back
extent?
to the Middle East. There could be any number of things that we don't know about why they went to Afghanistan and then done what they done. There could be who knows what the reasons for it. There may be several reasons that allowed them to get away with it because they did do it that way. I just know that rich people do deviant things all the time, very deviant things to make money. Things that people like us would never do and would think is crazy. But to them, it's a pathway to money and power.
How much do you think George Bush knew? Just that a big attack was imminent, or that intelligence had already gathered the exact details?
No,
I
I think he
Al-Qaeda
knew
are targeting
details.
these
I think
planes
he
on
knew
this
the
day.
day and everything.
So we kind of have the answer to that from documentation reviews.
Debate's turning into a shouting match.
You might not believe the the document reviews, but at very least, then if you say those are all fake, then you have to have either some indication of what the real information was or some reason to believe it was fake that is organic to the data itself, not just the general, well, it's data that disagrees with me, ergo must be fake. So yeah, we know we looked into what was known. It was an intelligence failure, so there were massive after action reviews, which we've seen, some of, and we've seen the alterations that were made because of them.
So the intelligence was so good that only what was it, like 2 days after the attack, 3, it was real close. They knew who did it and everything, but yet somehow they didn't know that Iraq didn't have weapons of mass destruction. All the things with the what was it, like the war game shit and stuff that was going on, where all the planes and stuff. There was a lot of weird stuff going on with the military that day. There's a lot of weird things about several high-ranking people. Just so happened they worked in the World Trade Center, but several high-ranking people just so happened to wasn't there that day. But quite a few of them too. And these are not just conspiracy theories. These are actual known events. There's a whole lot of weird stuff around that particular day, around that particular event.
So
yeah, to
Could
me,
just be coincidence, but I just think it's more. Go ahead.
Yeah, to me, let it happen seems unlikely because there would have had to been at least dozens of patriots in the intel community that got the information, passed it up the chain, and at least a few of them would have become whistleblowers saying, hey, we knew the exact dates of this attack months in advance and they didn't stop it.
That's true.
And they
That's
had the
actually
info.
accurate.
Clearly they're evil.
You don't need to know the exact date. You don't even need to know much about the attack. So LIHOP, the problem is LIHOP has a very low, I'm not saying it's true, but LIHOP has an incredibly low burden because LIHOP could go from, we know his name's Osama bin Laden, we are aware of the fact that these are their names and here's how they're entering the country and we know what hotel they're staying at and we let that happen on purpose. All the way down to there's some shape of chatter on networks that are vaguely suggesting that attacks are becoming more likely imminent, and we just kept doing what we were doing.
Yeah, but
and
all of those.
we didn't. We sort of we just sort of fumbled and tripped and sat on things too long. And that's the problem is it can look like incompetence. That's the goal of somebody doing a lie hop. The goal is, even if I got caught, this could look like incompetence. And that's
but in order for it to be okay, but there's two positions that are mutually exclusive there that you're trying to sort of land on both. So the first position is I know the plan and I allow the plan to go forwards, meaning I know planes will crash into the towers. That runs into Flying Scotsman's problem, that if I know that much, then somebody in the chain could be a whistleblower. The second one is I don't know much. I just know something bad is going to happen, and I don't act to head it off. Okay.
Or I do, but the way I act could look like inaction.
Well,
look like incompetence.
There's not just one person making decisions not to act on intel. And it's certainly not the president who's making the decision not to act on intel. The FBI is the one who I think identified the potential terrorist working in, training to fly planes in Florida. I believe it was the FBI identified that. They were not coordinating with the NSA, which had chatter, or the CIA, which was aware of Al-Qaeda operations in Afghanistan, or any of that.
Yeah.
So,
and that's what I would do. If I were doing LIHOP, I would be like, they keep begging for an interagency, sort of like CODIS for interagency cooperation. They've been begging for it for 10 years. And look, we are still negotiating it in Congress, but the bloody Democrats, or, whatever, you sort of, you just drag your feet because if I want to do a foreign war and make all this oil money with my Halliburton shares, et cetera, I've got to encourage it.
What is it you want to do a foreign war? What is it that you want to let happen on purpose?
That terrorists are regularly trying to do attacks on US soil, I think.
Okay, and so what you do is you weaken our defensive infrastructure, and then 9/11 happens.
Yeah, I would just look across the system and take their word for it. They would say, here's the greatest threat. If you would regularly be having briefings, because hijackings are like weekly occurrence in the 90s, and you'd be constantly having briefings, and you would just know, they would tell you in their briefings. You would have somebody come from the FBI, and somebody come from the NSA, and somebody come from CIA, and all go, fuck, we don't have a mutual system. This is insane. Do you understand how many foreign agents get caught by FBI officials but don't have the clearance and can't figure out what's on? And we do want those people kept in custody. We do want to interrogate them. And because they don't have the right system, we keep letting them go. And if you were this lie hopper, could just sit in that meeting and go, thank you so much for that. I really appreciate your service. I'm going to get on this immediately. And then immediately you go, okay, I know now what needs to not happen, and that is an interagency information sharing service. Because if I implement that and we thwart terrorist attacks, I won't get my war in the Middle East, which I'm hedging billions of dollars of wealth on and have been promising to other people, or blah, 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 whatever it might be. Again, not saying it's true. I'm just saying I'm giving you the most plausible case as I see it. And then they just sort of go between meeting here and meeting there, and they'll get told, here's the most crucial lever that you could pull. And you just go, okay, sure, and don't pull that lever. Or pull it, but pull it in a way that, for the one about an interagency information sharing service, I would just keep going, I can't get it yet. And you would be defensible. You'd say, well, we haven't been attacked. There's no budget for it.
So what that effectively comes down to is not, I know that 9/11 is going to happen. It's just, I know that some terrorist is going to do something bad.
Yeah.
And then, oh my God, man, that really worked. And then we attacked Afghanistan, which does not make much money for Halliburton.
Oh, you don't think it did? I thought they used a lot of missiles and rockets that cost like 30 to 100 grand.
Halliburton does oil infrastructure, does industry infrastructure.
Sorry.
Doesn't Halliburton they won a few no-bid contracts.
Anyway, fair enough to that. I couldn't argue for the commercial side of it. I don't think it was a lie hop, but I think the case for it is strong. The only point I'm making to you, rather than arguing with you, Omni, because I think you're right broadly, is there's not evidence for it, is I'm just saying the burden can be so incredibly low on the lie hop side, because it could be let those particular Saudis on that particular day do that particular attack. But lie hop could also be, as I'm saying, just you're a Republican who wants war. You've got shares in Lockheed Martin, you think that you hate Muslims, so your own biases might make you more inclined to do that. Right? Oh, I'm not spending more money on these interagency systems. You know, you could square it with yourself. Perhaps it could be. It gets to the point where it could almost be a subconsciously let it happen on purpose, which is why I'm trying to say the bar's really low. It's very difficult to argue.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, at that point, yeah, then I don't really have a disagreement. If it's, you know, if at the lowest conceivable bar for it, I don't have an argument. You know, with it's just not. At that point, it kind of ceases to be a conspiracy and just becomes negligence. Or bloodthirstiness, you know, and either one of them is entirely possible.
Yeah. And there's what's that rule about sufficient incompetence starts to look like malice?
Yeah, well, it's don't mistake for malice what can be adequately explained by incompetence.
But it's the second one after that where it says sufficiently advanced malice is indistinguishable and hence meaningfully the same thing. Like Stalin starving people. It's like, after a point, does it fucking matter that it was incompetence?
Are you thinking of the sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic?
Similar, yeah, similar construction.
Sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from a rigged demo.
Yeah. Anyway, we are coming up now in 3 hours. Give us your final thoughts each. Omnivore, go on.
Yeah, I think that the problem with conspiracy theories in general is that you need to provide actual evidence for the conspiracy theory, not statements of motive, which you cast as evidence, or potential statements of this could have happened, which is a particular fallacy. This could have happened, therefore it must have happened. So I think you have to show actual evidence of conspiratorial action, which of course, most conspiracy theorists admit you'll never have.
To me, I would argue, like, you're never going to see that. They are very clever and able to pull these things off. All you're ever going to see is, oh, how convenient for them. Look how rich they got, but we can't prove it perfectly. Like, if they're that powerful, what evidence would you expect to see?
Yeah, are you asking me?
Yeah, if they go through all the trouble and spend money to keep it very well hid, then all you got to go on is motive.
Yeah, and everything you get this. But is that what they want you to think? Do they know that you know? You've got this sort of like type 2 chaos where, like the point you were making before, Scott, anything too egregiously obvious becomes this question of why would you make it so obvious? You know, it's often my point about the passport at ground zero, where I'm like, it doesn't actually feed the case that it was an inside job, because if it was an inside job, you'd be absolutely wild to go dropping passports by hand down there. Just like do the buildings, like fewest moving parts.
Yeah,
it can look either way, where it's like, well, maybe it's intentionally meant to look fake so that it looks real because it's actually fake, but it's real, you know, like
Yeah, like they know the psychology. You think, well, why would they do it that way? Therefore, it's unlikely. Yeah. Like I've realized, I think Building 7 is a big part of that site because no one died in Building 7. So if it was on purpose, it's completely unnecessary. So that could be another thing added in to just confuse people.
Well, it would be a massive operation to just confuse people, especially because an enormous piece of Tower 2, I think it was, blasted through the wall of Building 7 before it caught fire and collapsed. So if it was done to, quote, just confuse people, they got very lucky.
Yeah, and there would need to be hundreds of people in on it to plant explosives and stuff.
As well.
It's definitely not the simplest version of a conspiracy.
And my other argument about that is bringing down the buildings with controlled demolition is by far the most complex thing you would have to do that day.
Yeah.
Like you would need 10% of your planning time on hijacking a plane, because planes already flew by wire in the 90s. So you could radio control a plane into a building with existing technology, not a problem. That's an afternoon's work, I reckon, for these dastardly people. But to bring down those buildings, controlled demolitions in a building that's on fire, that's crawling with police and fire people, where there's active fires going on and crushing and stuff, where you've got det cord and explosives or radio explosives, which is even worse, just insane amounts of complexity would be 90% of the operation would be all of that complexity to bring down the building. And you get 99% of the value of the attack without the building even needing to collapse.
True.
Yeah, that's what I say all the time.
Yeah.
I don't think that they would have bothered to plant bombs and tried to bring down the buildings because the planes hitting the buildings to me would have been enough. The buildings falling was just cherry on the, on the top.
Another argument I've heard is that they specifically designed those buildings so they would collapse in a fire like that.
If them buildings were built in the 60s, though, it's an awful long time away
that
from.
Would be. Yeah, or the Pentagon started construction on September 11th, 1941.
Did it really? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's a fact. But I mean, this just makes it, again, this always just makes it less likely it's a conspiracy, because now you don't have to just do this insanely complex plot with thousands of moving parts, but you've got to do it on a really specifically precise day for no operational advantage. Just the numerology doesn't mean that you do or don't get to invade Afghanistan and Iraq. And, that's what I always find so funny about those wild added complexities of and the Twin Towers brought down 33 years after they were born, and 33 is a gematria number for this. And it's like, wow, at a certain point, you've got to get everything right down to the second for decades, centuries beforehand.
True. And I guess it does work because, even when I'm trying to red pill people, keep it simply, I can't resist bringing up all the other stuff.
Right.
And those details.
And that disorganized thinking can, that you sort of reel from it. You're like, what? Why are we now discussing gematria?
Yeah, well.
Yeah, I think the focus should be on building 7, right? And cracking that nut and dealing with all the issues in the official report versus the observation. Because that is so well documented visually and through NIST report. And it's like what NIST says doesn't match up with the observation. So it's a guaranteed, okay, they're hiding something for some reason. They're not telling us the truth.
I wanted to wrap up, but you've started a new good debate. Do you want to take the floor with it? Building 7?
Oh, if you're wrapping up, let's wrap up. I just came in here because
I like the idea. I'm not going to do 3 hours each time, but
Building 7's a no-brainer for me, man. The official report doesn't match the observation. It's pretty much that simple.
Give the full framing though for say. So you're saying essentially 9/11 was an inside job, and the smoking gun is Building 7.
What I'm going to say is there's definitely a conspiracy going on with Building 7, right? How far that stems into the Twin Towers, I can't tie all those pieces together. But what I know for sure is the observation does not match the NIST report, and because they say it's a cascading effect, but yet it's falling for 2.25 seconds, or around 2.25 seconds at free fall speed. So it can't be a cascade because that's completely contradicting to what a cascade effect is, right?
Could it
the domino effect versus dropping a piece of paper off the table, or you get what I mean?
Sure, I could take it, but I won't. Who wants to go?
I'll do it, but we have to have some kind of equal time rule. That's you, Eggshells.
Yeah, to me, Building 7 was just pure mockery. They're saying, hey, look how powerful we are, that we can do this in front of the whole world and make it this blatant.
And then lie to you about it.
So, if we can't do an equal time thing, then we can't do it.
We can. I'm going to get it live in a second. Go for it.
Okay.
I'll
it's official debate? Am I doing official? Okay, go. I'm not really up for this, but I'll do it.
Well, you're aware that a giant piece of one of the buildings, one of the towers, I think it was Tower 2, but I'm not 100% sure, tore a huge hole in the side of Building 7 when it fell, which is what started the fires, and the falling building cut off the water supply. So is your contention that they just got super lucky with their their conspiratorial planning because all of the necessary elements were supplied by the other towers falling, or that something else is they plan for those things to happen and it just worked out perfectly? What's your theory?
So the idea is.
Oh,
sorry, Rick. I was just going to say quickly. The idea is that this makes. What does this matter to 24 columns in the middle? That's what keeps the building up, right? That the way I look at it is you're saying that there's 3 floors on fire, right? What was it 7, 11, and something else? We went over this the other day. You're saying that some fires burnt these things in a coordinated fashion, right? Because if it just weakened the integrity of 1 or 2, it's not going to fall down like it did.
How many
they
people
have to burn equally.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, you added a coordinated fashion.
There's 24 columns in the middle of that building. Who gives a fuck what happens to the edge of it?
Or pure?
Let me just jump in because I think let's take this back to the normal wide stream. Do we want to?
So I didn't mean to jump in there.
Yeah,
sorry,
Rick.
No, it's good. It's good. It's a great.
I don't
it's a great
care, dude.
It's just we got to the 3
I've already
hours.
crushed Omni on this topic.
All right.
Omni knows.
I like it.
He
I just think
well, I'm not willing to debate, a ton of other people. I mean, 2-on-1 is going to be hard enough, especially if they get equal time, double my time.
Yeah, I'm putting back the talk time indicator.
Yeah. So
I'm happy to sit out because I'm more into the symbolism rather than the technical physics and stuff of it.
And going back into the wide stream, doesn't help in terms of having a controlled conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So what are we doing? 30 seconds, 20 seconds, back and forth?
Keep it here then. I'll do, we'll do a minute aside.
Jeez, what is the deal with your monologue? A minute? That just gives too much
out early. That's fine. But
it gives too much time for somebody to waffle and just stack a bunch of claims or points and you can't address them. That's why I don't like it. It's like, just go back.
30 seconds.
I like the back and forth.
All right, 30 seconds. You can go first.
Yeah, I stated my position clearly. The NISC ST or whatever it is, the NIST report, clearly states there's a cascading effect. The observation clearly shows it's not a cascading effect.
Okay, so you say it clearly shows it's not a cascade effect based on how it falls, but in fact, examination of the videos shows that there is an internal collapse happening first. The penthouse falls first, and then the building shifts in one direction substantially, and then it falls. So, what makes you think that's not a cascading effect?
The University of Fairbanks, Alaska, did their analysis on it, reported it, and timed it around 2 2.25 seconds of free fall speed. You can't have that with a cascade. It's the opposite of what cascade is. So cascade, let me explain it. It's like a domino effect, right? You hit one domino, the next one falls. So if like pillar 1 falls, 2 goes next, right? 3, 4, 5, 6, etc. Right? All right. Well, free fall means they all fail at the same time.
So first off, the university in Fairbanks, Alaska that you cited didn't do a very good job. We already know about that. However, there was another third party in the city that did their own private investigation, and they concluded that the NIST report was on target. So I see your Fairbanks, Alaska, and raise you the guys that were next door and actually had access, was closer to the plan. So no, I don't buy that. I don't buy that. The Fairbanks, Alaska stuff.
All right, so what reason? Oh, so yeah, go ahead.
This was done by Wildberger Associates, and I can post it in the chat if you want to see it.
Who funded that research?
It was done privately. I don't know.
Yeah. So what reason do we have to believe that University of Fairbanks, Alaska is incompetent or they're lying to us, i.e. there's a conspiracy going on there?
So first off, because the guy behind it, his his beliefs on it are moderately well documented, although since I didn't know I was going to be discussing this tonight, I don't have it on hand. But secondly, because the simulation that he built was predicated on saying that the joiner elements, the joiner studs, were removed from the structure, which there's of course no evidence for, and it's not even clear that that could be done.
Yeah, so now you're just making things up.
No,
I'm saying I don't like his analysis. I don't have any reason to discredit him, but I'm going to discredit the integrity of a university. An American university, you're discrediting their integrity, saying they're incompetent. I say that's quite the conspiracy you walked yourself into.
It was a
so justify that.
Okay, I will. It was a personal project. It was not mandated by the university. It was just done by a guy who worked for the university using his own grad students. So no problem with the university. Not discrediting.
It wasn't a personal.
Despite what you're saying, yeah, it was his idea. It was his project.
It wasn't a personal endeavor. It was funded by the university.
So he works
and outside sources as well. Yep.
He works for
with the approval of the university. So basically on behalf of the university. Kind of like how research works, like when the government funds.
No.
Dude, you're going to keep doing this when I'm talking.
I'm telling you, that's not how it works.
But let him say it.
You good?
Well, I mean, if you're upset that I'm impugning the university because the good name of the university is attached to this and they asked him to do it, that's not true. They didn't ask him to do it.
You're changing the position again.
That's what you're implying.
Pure Rigor, stop interrupting.
Fuck me, interrupting. Gotta work on that one. Yeah, I'm not implying that at all. I'm not saying that. Okay. All right, have fun.
Yep.
What's the core discussion? Oh, did Rigger leave?
So he's hinging it on a study that was done by Fairbanks, Alaska, by a professor there who had his grad students look into it. They built a simulation. They came up with a theory. If I recall correctly, it's that the small support bolts, although I don't know what the name for those are, were removed to weaken the structure to allow for the collapse. If I recall this correctly, I might have something a little wrong, but since he's bringing that up and it's, a pretty big report, I don't think that the guy is a fraud. I think he's a real professor and I think he really did this, but it wasn't done. There's no evidence that it was done at behest of the university, which is what he's claiming. And he couldn't show that. So, he got mad and.
Was he saying he was asking who it was funded by, right?
Well, he asked who my collapse, my analysis is by Weidberger Associates, which is in New York City. It's another third party evaluation. So I have one that supports my position. He has one that kind of supports his. And I'm saying, well, I feel like mine is a better thing because it doesn't hinge on as I understand it, the claim about pre-weakening the structure, which I don't, if I'm remembering correctly, the claim that the structure was pre-weakened, there is no support for. It's just that he did a simulation that shows that it would look like this. And, obviously Pure and I don't even agree on what it looked like. We've seen videos of the penthouse falling first. We've seen the video that shows that the building shifted in a direction. We've seen the video that shows that it was a huge gash opened in the side and that the collapsing of the other tower turned off the water. So he doesn't address any of that. And as far as I know, the professor Fairbanks doesn't address any of that either. I mean, he doesn't deny it, but he doesn't, his theory of case is that somebody had gone in there and removed those support elements. So I don't see good evidence for that. And I refer to another third party, a very thorough third party research that I think makes incredibly strong case and backs up the NIST analysis as far, I don't know if it backs it up 100%, but it backs it up, very closely. So, But because I was saying I don't buy your source, or I don't think your source is in and of itself a compelling argument and ends the debate. And he said, well, you're impinging the name of a whole university. And I said, no, this is just a professor at the university. He said, well, he did it at behest of the university. And I said, that's not true. And he didn't.
Well, he sort of chose to do it under the university, I guess, because it was on the university's page. I can't find it at the moment. But he had a page where he showed his videos and his modeling of it toppling over.
Yes. The university did not disown him. It was his project. The university didn't go and find their top guy and be like, look into this.
Has Rigger left then? Oh, he's just what happened?
Yeah.
Okay, he's gone in the other room. Okay. Well,
when I wanted equal time, I think that was the death knell, honestly.
I was just asking ChatGPT.
Omni, you've got much more than equal time. I don't think it feels like it to you, but if you look at the board, it's.
Oh, for what happened there, yes. Yes.
I was just asking ChatGPT. This is kind of funny. You might like this. So I asked it how long it took to fall, basically.
I have that too. Yeah.
And it has a moment, according to this, of free fall. Experienced free fall acceleration for about 2.25 seconds during part of its collapse, it says. The visible, I was asking it how long did it take in total? 6.9 seconds is what it says. Okay.
Yep.
So I said, how long would it take if I dropped a lead ball off the top of the building? And it said 6.7 seconds.
Here's the problem with Halsey's thing, since we're moving. Here's Halsey's thing. The penthouse is on top still, right? And his thing shows the building already. If you look at the start, this is Halsey's own modeling. I found it finally. Notice here, there's a gap. No gaps anywhere else. There's a gap here and there's a gap there. And you can see it describes a bit of a line. So he has pre-cut this whole building all the way through, right? Then this is Halsey's work. And then look at it topple. Already on that line. Now what this is doing, this corner is crushing through rock, while that far corner that we aren't able to see, that should be up here, is lifting up in the air. Millions of tons is lifting up. This gaining altitude ever so slightly as it topples over and moves hundreds and hundreds of meters, suddenly accelerates hundreds of meters laterally, staying fully all connected. It's fully all like one Tonka truck block. It suggests that people over that side are getting like catapulted. Imagine you just get slammed to the wall of the building and then whoom, as the whole building toppled. You would floors become vertical.
Scenario?
It just doesn't seem believable. And
is that the Fairbanks one?
Yeah, this is the Fairbanks, Alaska guy.
Yeah, right. If I recall, I wasn't, I wasn't swayed by it.
And this still shows that that's crushing through.
Also, that's falling over on its side. Didn't Building 7 fall more or less straight down?
He's saying what he's showing here is I modeled NIST's thing and I cut one beam at the corner because here's what's claimed to happen in the NIST report. There's a gouge down the back here. There's fires across these floors.
Yeah,
this crumbles and this whole backside sort of.
Yeah, so he says his scenario shouldn't have fallen that way, but yeah, okay.
Yeah, he's saying if that was fire from that beam, it should have buckled at that side and then toppled in that direction.
Yeah, well, you can build a bad, you can build a bad model, but I don't know that I don't see a reason to conclude that his model is, necessarily a better model than, what the other, what the Weidlinger Associates guys did.
Well, I think you can see that it's clearly just very
Here,
naive.
Let me put this in the chat just so you can see, because it's worth your looking at. And it was done on behalf of a plaintiff. So it was done for a court, but I don't know who the plaintiff was. There, you know, and you can see they have lots of, I mean, they have a ton of modeling in there. It's not a video, but it's a ton of modeling.
Where's the link? Side
It's in
chat?
the side chat. Yeah, it's in the side chat.
All right.
It's not a link.
Yeah, there's another one. There's another model. Somebody else made a... And it wasn't just that Indian guy. Yeah, this one that shows the collapse. Three minutes. Oh, wow. This is not one I've seen before. So Nat Geo starts an uncontrolled black smoke fire under an H-beam with weight on it, and the beam bends.
Oh no, jet fuel is melting steel beams.
Oh no, I melted them straight through, turned them directly to slag. They were 100% competent steel beams until the instant they turned into mush.
Oh no. No.
Actually, doesn't bending them heat them up anyway? Once they start to bend, wouldn't some of the bending start generating its own heat?
I think so. Well, so pressure generates, generates heat. Friction generates heat. So probably, I don't know the coefficients.
We need somebody to step up for 9/11 being an inside job.
So this is something about in section 3.1 on page 48 says the role of knife connections in the collapse. Mr. Nordenson claimed that limited tension capacity. I don't know who Nordenson is. Claimed that the limited tension capacity of the knife connections played a primary role in the collapse of the building. Stems from unsubstantiated claims about how these connections were fabricated capacity estimates that do not conform with either published test data or elementary plausibility calculations and erroneous analytical models. Mr. Nolson's critique of the knife connections assumes without any factual basis that E7OT-4 weld electrodes were used for shop welding the knife connections. This is significant because the electrode is known to be defective. It became notorious after it was determined in inspections in the 1984 Northridge earthquake. Blah, blah, blah. They were particularly brittle. He appears to base the use of this electrode solely on the date of the construction of WTT-7, which has predated the earthquake. There is no basis whatsoever to believe these electrodes were used in this building. Ample reason to believe they were not, etc., etc. Now, I don't know if this is something that applies to the Fairbanks one. I don't, it might be. I'm not sure, but.
Yeah, this is their modeling of it, and I think this is pretty compelling. Yeah, so floors start to fall, and as that hits, it's just now really hard to keep anything up. So the collapse has already started. This is the dominoes that people expected, but the outside still looks kind of okay from the front.
Yep.
And then, yeah, there's fewer and fewer pillars to hold it up. And at a certain point, the whole thing gives out.
I mean, to be fair, most of the conspiracy theories relies on, being able to eyeball incredibly complex building collapse and thinking that if it doesn't make sense to you, it's got to be a conspiracy theory.
Is there any defenders?
No, I'm trying to, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the videos, my gut feeling of the videos of Building 7 collapse, like we've seen no other skyscraper like that collapse in that manner from fire, I would argue. there's one in China that came close where half the building came straight down, but the other half was still there.
There's also the earthquake.
Well, I mean, I want to point out that it's a very unique situation. It's not just a fire. It's a fire after, the water mains were destroyed and after a giant piece of rubble crashed through the exterior. And because people had evacuated, it was allowed to burn out of control. So
Okay.
if you can find
there's no defenders, right? So what are we doing right now? There's no defenders. We're past 3 hours.
Yep. Let's fold it.
Can we just save it till next week? So there's somebody to argue against?
I'm down. We'll schedule one. Rigger and Omnivore can go at it. Bring sources.
Yeah, I think that might be better.
Riggs, yield the floor.
Okay.
Riggs is the server owner.
That's okay.
Okay. Well, I mean, if he wants to.
Yeah. Yeah, wouldn't you rather debate against somebody? So.
I would much rather debate against somebody, but if it's Rigger, it needs to be,
Well, you got to stop interrupting people, and then maybe you can have an opinion. Unfortunately.
I just wanted to say thank you for hosting Eggshells, because I noticed you're always very friendly and non-judgmental to everyone with a theory, so I appreciate it.
Oh, he's a bit of a jerk, though.
I am a bit. Bit of a jerk. All right, well, good fun. Thanks for joining in all. It's been very good. The mapping has finally started to make somewhat sense, but it still has a problem that early notes just get huge and therefore the debate can't evolve, but it's been very useful. So see you all same bat channel next week. I want people to pick a topic they want to die on the hill of, that you want to win everybody over to your side. You start off over here and you want to get this colourful mix over on your side.
Oh, okay.
I
want to do Einstein versus Newton.
Say again, Einstein versus
Newton.
Okay, you can do an Einstein versus Newton. That'd be good. And so that's my mode there, I think, will be King of the Hill, where you can step up, take anything, and anybody in the room can challenge you. And you get sort of preferential treatment if you're on the King of the Hill, in that if people can dogpile you, you can sort of choose your talking terms a bit more. And that way we don't have to schedule 2 speakers on something if you care about something enough to present it to a whole group of people, or we'll also take scheduled debates if you want to win against somebody, because the sizing is nearly ready to actually adjudicate. But the top adjudicates anyway perfectly.
Okay.
Yep. All right. So see you all next week. Any other takers, message me. Good fun. Should we just drag everybody into the other room, Riggs?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and take care of that. All right.